Hello everybody, welcome back to the show. Today, we're gonna be doing something that I like to call, something, debate. Yeah. Debate review time, okay? So, obviously, you've seen the title and thumbnail. You're gonna get what it says. Now, for those of you who are new here, I always make sure to leave timestamps in the description below, so if you want to skip around, that is totally understandable. I get that not everybody has enough free time to watch the entire thing, though I would highly recommend watching this entire thing as either a video or a podcast or whatever. Doesn't really matter. Doesn't matter if you're watching it live or after the fact. It's meant to be as entertaining as humanly possible, though I will say, bit of a rough start this stream. I was just sort of spacing out, but that's okay. That's okay. Now, just a little bit of backstory before I sort of get into the meat, the juice. I've debated both DemonMama and Hunter Avallone on the topic that is neopronouns. That is right, everybody. That is the reason why it's such an interesting topic to me is because it feels so abstract and disconnected, right? It's almost like a arguing about what the logical conclusion of certain ideas are, right? For instance, you might notice that conservatives might actually use, neopronouns as like a parody almost of the queer community, right? Whereas there are other people that are like, wait, actually, yeah, that actually makes sense, right? Hello, Lichfalp, welcome to the stream. But yeah, so, before I get into it, right, I want to establish what my position is, okay? Because, aside from me being contrarian and just arguing with everybody, because I'm me, I'd say that my position in general is one of, I don't want to say indifference, but one where I feel like I'm not opposed to it, right? And ultimately my goal is going to be, okay, I'm going to be respectful to people, right? I'm not going to, treat people poorly or, I'm going to use the pronouns that the person wants me to use, right? You know, at least within reason, right? So I'm obviously if it's a billion syllables, I'm probably not going to it's sort of the and I wish this had been explained to me sooner, but I kind of came up with it on my own. Think of it that you do have to judge it on a case by case basis, right? So think of it as similar to a nickname, right? Is there like a very like a super clear line where it's like or set of criteria for what can and can't be a nickname? No, you sort of just get the vibe for it, right? So if somebody's nickname is like a slur, you might not immediately, respect that, right? You're not going to start calling them by that. Or if it's a million syllables, you're not going to call them that. But if somebody named Jim goes by Jimmy, well, you'd probably respect that, right? But it's not because it meets some sort of specific criteria. There's just sort of a vibe for it, which I know is not the answer that anyone is ever going to look for. But that being said, I am not necessarily in favor of it either. Now, the reason why I'm not entirely in favor of it is because I don't know how it serves any utility, right? On one hand, yes, I'm going to respect people regardless, but that doesn't mean I understand or think it's logical, right? I don't understand why someone would be it's okay, it's one thing if and something that you'll notice my position, and this isn't my exact position now, but we'll start with the DemonMama debate because it's from a while ago. It was one of my first debates actually, so I wasn't very good back then in terms of my rhetoric or style of debate. However, my argument then, and I don't know how well I articulated it, I'll have to see, is basically that, well, you should be able to use they, them for everybody, because they, them is, a broad all-encompassing term that can be used to denote any human being. That's the way I still kind of see it, right? Now, that doesn't mean that I'm gonna be disrespectful or use they, them on people that don't want to be referred to as they, them, or at least I'll try my best, right? Like, I know DemonMama's partner named Doe use its pronouns, right? It uses its pronouns. So, like, I don't have a problem with that, right? Even though I don't really get it, maybe I think it's a little weird or whatever. Like, it's not me. No one's saying I have to use that as my pronouns, right? So it's like, okay, I'll be respectful even though I don't really understand it, right? Because ultimately, I think being respectful towards people does serve more utility than being disrespectful to them, right? And ultimately, preferences are usually derived from things that, give people utility, right? So, I don't know, so for someone like Doe, for instance, even though I personally don't understand why it prefers the pronouns it uses, right? I mean, that is their preference, and people have preferences for, whatever serves them the most utility, generally speaking. So I can respect the fact that, okay, it prefers... Okay, are we back? Sorry about the lag. I did the thing where basically, you go to, the Wi-Fi router, and I turned it off and on again. I know, I am an absolute genius. Perhaps I should consider working in the tech industry. All jokes aside, where was I? I think I was talking about, oh, right. So, yeah, basically... Okay, are we back? Sorry about the lag. Oh, no, 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 no. You go to... Nope. Don't do... I didn't mean to play it. I'm sorry. This is a... I'm a professional streamer, everybody, okay? I swear. Alright. Oh my goodness. But, yeah. Oh, right. I think where I was is I was gonna mention the fact that, okay, I also don't understand why, like, I don't have, like, I've never heard of a very good argument in favor of neopronouns either. So, there's sort of like I hate to be the enlightened centrist here, but I think that, Hunter Avallone and DemonMama, they just need to resolve their differences, you know what I mean? In all seriousness, though, the way I see, you'll notice some arguments I make, okay? In both of these debates, okay? These are debates of the past. And I'm going to agree with some of them. I'm going to disagree with other arguments I have made. And I am absolutely going to criticize, myself from the DemonMama debate specifically. I guarantee it. Because that was one of my first debates. So it's from a while ago. So I was very new to the debate scene. And, yeah, aside from me being contrarian, I think I have a fairly neutral position. Again, I wouldn't say it's indifference. It's, I don't know, I'm just not for or against it specifically. Who are you debating, bruh? No, I did 2 debates, okay? I already did the debates, but I'm gonna go over them and talk about them, and then come to the correct conclusion, as per usual. One of the many benefits of always being right, of course. But yeah, I thought that this would be an interesting thing to go over. If nothing else, for debate advice, right? Because obviously my style of rhetoric has gotten way, way, way better. However, for, like, the short amount of time that I've, been in the debate scene, I think I've gotten fairly decent. I mean, I absolutely destroyed Rose Mollet in my most recent debate. Like, she got completely shit on. Like, it's not even a question. Anyways. But I'm glad, let me know if the stream lags again. I'm very sorry about that. That's my bad. Stop calling, why do you keep calling me Bottomyos? Fucking asshole. Would you be fine ever debating Destiny? Yeah, I don't see why I wouldn't. I don't have a problem with that. Um, but yeah, I don't see why I wouldn't. If I have a disagreement with him, then yeah. So, yeah, alright. So, the first debate we're going to be going over is the one that I did with DemonMama. Now, this was a while ago. This is one of my first debates. I've improved a lot since then, right? But it was on January 29th, 2023. It was a bit after I had debated somebody else who was more of a conservative. I guess I think I just saw that DemonMama was streaming, and I decided, you know what, I'll see if she wants to debate me. I think I don't really remember, but without further ado, let's see how this goes. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Hold on, let me just make sure. Here, wait, keep talking so I can see how loud the audio is. Chat, let me know if the audio is... I hope the audio is good. Okay, yeah, I'll turn you up a little bit. Okay, there we go.
All right, so what name do you want me to put you as on stream, and what are your pronouns?
Just put me as Femyoz, same name as my Discord and YouTube, and I'm fine with any and all pronouns. Based.
Oh damn, using some Neopronouns here.
Yeah,
huh?
even I'm fine. Like, I think I'm fine. Like, people can refer to me with Neopronouns if they want. Like realistically, it's not like... Okay, so the issue I have with Neopronouns is, okay, like, my main position is, it's fine as long as you give people the option to use other pronouns, like, that, like, are more normal, I guess. This is a fucking terrible argument, right off the bat. I don't know why I would frame it this way. So, now, I don't entirely agree with the exact position I had at the time, but if you're going to make this argument, right, the best way to start, right, is not by asserting your own claim. It's much better if you ask them questions about what they believe. So, for instance, if I, instead of saying that this is the way things should be and making a prescriptive claim right off the bat, which isn't as good as you would think it is, oh my god, I'm really spacing. Jeez. What was I saying? Oh, right. So, rather than doing that, it's much better if you frame it as, why should I be obliged to use neopronouns? Why is it obligatory? Why shouldn't I be able to use they, them as all-encompassing, non-specific gender-neutral pronouns that can be applicable to anyone who fits under the category of human being that exists, right? Because if you're talking about a non-specific individual, you would probably default to they, them, right? And I believe that they, them pronouns are all-encompassing, and I still believe that. Again, I'm willing to be respectful to people, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm, ideologically, in agreement, if that makes sense. But,
Why?
if you... What?
Why?
See? And now she gets to ask me the question, and now I have to substantiate my position. Because the whole point of pronouns is to be non-specific and efficient. This was a mistake to say that. What I should have said right there is, the point of pronouns is so that you don't have to repeat a person's name over and over again. And neopronouns are basically like a nickname, so that defeats the purpose. And then, if she were to try to refute that claim, what I could say is, oh, so you don't believe that the purpose of pronouns is so that you don't have to say their name over and over again? Because that wouldn't be... I don't think that's a bullet that anyone would bite, right? Or at least I don't think that there would be any strategic advantage in doing so, right?
Ooh, I don't know if I agree with you on that. What's your source? Where do you pull that information from?
Oh,
Because
dear.
I don't actually think that there's a. I mean, what do you mean? Oh dear! Wait, you can't back out that
Okay,
quickly.
all right.
Where do you get that from? Is that just kind of an ass pull? Because it sounds like most of the time when people say the point of pronouns is X, they're just making it up.
See, so I think that the issue I had there was I was conflating the result of pronouns existing, which is it being slightly more efficient, in terms of how we speak, with what they were designed for in the first place, if that makes sense. So pronouns were designed to be sort of like replacements almost for a name. So if I say they, so it's I'm referencing somebody else. You can substitute they for whoever I'm talking about, right? But if, let's say, I use pronouns that aren't gender neutral, like he, him, I am saying, okay, well, they are in this category, right? But they, them is not really even a category, right? It's all encompassing, right? So that should have been my argument going into it.
Literally,
All right,
my sources.
all
I
right.
made it fuck up.
I'll go to Google and Google why do pronouns exist. All right.
Yeah, that's
the
gonna
first,
be some. Yeah.
the first result.
Yeah, that's gonna be a super base. The best thing that we know is that Google is always correct when you type a question into Google.
Well, I mean, if you want me to do research, I mean, like,
I mean,
that's what.
you're
Do
the
you
one
want
who
me?
wanted
Do
to
you
debate me
want
on
me to?
neopronouns.
Do you want me to use Yahoo
No,
or
I-
Bing?
I just feel like it's a little bit. I feel like it's a little bit of a. Let's call it a.
So, okay, this was actually good. Okay, lightening the mood. All right, it's this was important because I noticed there was a tiny bit of tension, and I decided, you know what? Okay, I'll make a joke, and that'll make me a little bit more likable. It'll loosen the tension, right? And I think it was effective, right? So I think that I would still do that, right? That make the joke about Yahoo or Bing or whatever if I was in that position, right?
Philosophical cop out to say that, well, Google tells me that
Okay,
when I Google the first thing.
Well, you asked me
it's
for a
kinda like-
source. I thought, okay.
That is true. She did ask me for a source, so I was looking for one. But I don't know. I think that ultimately it would have been better if I had just started the argument out the way I described, being like, okay, well, the point of pronouns is so that you don't have to say a person's name over and over again, right? You're referencing them with a pronoun, right? And I don't think that anyone disagrees with that, right? That's literally what you're taught in elementary school.
Okay, so I was trying to have a.
You didn't have one, is my point. My
Well,
point is
'cause
that it was an ass pull. It wasn't.
And if she doesn't agree with me on that, I think that would actually be very interesting, because then we could get into an abstract discussion that I think I would actually really be down for.
Yeah, okay, maybe,
Yeah.
but like, okay, if it's a philosophical debate, then it's gonna be more
isn't all-
abstract.
aren't
I
all
don't
debates
build
philosophical?
my philosophy off of what other. I mean, it's influenced by what other people say, but ultimately, like, philosophy is not something that you usually have a source for.
Oh my god. No. You idiot. Femyoz, you absolute moron. No, this is not how you argue in a debate. You would say, I don't usually base my philosophy off of what I see, some source, what I see from some source, right?
But you asked
Well,
for a
I would say
source.
that I don't.
Like, I base it on whether or not it's logically consistent with other things that I believe in and moral axioms that we agree upon.
I would say that if you are making a linguistic claim, usually.
So this is interesting, because she went from saying it's a philosophical cop-out to talking about it being a linguistic claim. That's interesting. Okay.
You would have some sort of justification for that claim. Obviously, I don't literally mean that you have to point to a passage in the pronoun Bible.
I mean, I don't know. I feel like, okay, the issue that I have in this, I think, is I'm just trying too hard to appeal to common sense which I don't think works in a debate like this.
But I would assume that you would have, I would assume that you have some kind of like evidence or reason that you actually believe that like the purpose of pronouns is X. Because I feel like pronouns are a linguistic. I feel like pronouns are a linguistic structure that have multiple uses.
Sure, I don't disagree with that, and this is why I should have started out by asking her what her position is, so that one, I know what I'm arguing against, and two, the burden of proof is on her to explain why she's right. So if instead of, you know, right off the bat being like, here's why I'm against it, I think it would have been a lot smarter if I had just, you know, started with like whatever, a neutral approach and asked her to explain why it's good. Not why I should be, you know, not why, because if I have to explain why it's bad, right, that's, you know, that's a completely different goalpost, right?
Efficiency is
and you might notice that I shift the goalpost a little bit.
Only valuable to some
you'll notice that later.
People,
right?
And it's only valuable in some contexts. Like, yeah, it is easier for us to use a pronoun than to repeat someone's name.
Exactly. And this is a point that I probably should have harped on, right? She just admitted or acknowledged. I don't want to say admitted because I don't think she, you know, made a mistake. But she acknowledges the fact that yes, pronouns are meant to replace names. So wouldn't it defeat the entire purpose of pronouns if you're just having nicknames as your pronouns, right? That would have been a much better argument than anything I'm about to say.
But is it really more efficient to, like, if you have 18 guys in a room and you say he, him, he?
Well, no, that's an instance in which you would just say their name.
He. Like, is that actually helping anything? Is that actually efficiency? I don't think that their purpose is just efficiency.
Right. Well,
like,
and I want to make it clear.
I want to, like, the way we use them.
But I still do think that generally the whole point of them is literally to replace a person's name in a sentence when you are, it's a referential thing, right? When you use a pronoun, you are referencing somebody without saying their name.
Isn't just about that.
Right. And like, I'm fine with, like, I'm personally, like, fine with, like, neopronouns, like, again, like, as long as, like, there's the, because I feel like when I'm talking about someone, right, because usually pronouns are used, when you're, like, referring to somebody, I feel like,
well, sure, yeah,
I feel like, you know, like, because, like, what to you, defines, like, what a pronoun is, like, where's the cutoff, like, you know, obviously. This is also kind of a stupid argument. It's very fallacious. And I think that what DemonMama should have responded with, she's not going to, I don't think. But what she should have explained is, okay, what's the cutoff point for whether or not a nickname is it should be, you know, obligatory whether or not you call them that. Right? Do you have a certain set of criteria for whether or not you respect somebody's nickname? Hey, thank you for the $3! Mutated Cutie. Ignoring the past streams, what do you believe about neopronouns right now? Z, zer, and zers, all that. Do you think all neopronouns are the same? No, I don't think that all neopronouns are the same, right? Personally, I think that it's good to be respectful to people in general. So, like, you know, if somebody uses z's or zers or whatever, or its pronouns, I'll try my very best to respect that. Just because I want to be a nice person, you know, I just want to make people happy, right? Like, that's my goal in life. I would say that the best way to judge it, and this is what I believe right now, is judge it the same way you would judge a nickname, right? You would so for instance, you know, even though there's not a specific set of criteria we have, all right? There's not a bullet there's not a list of bullet points of criteria that a nickname has to meet for it to be respectable or whatever, right? But if somebody named Jim goes by Jimmy,
we'd all respect that most likely, right? Maybe it's a little inconvenient at first because it's like, oh, I have to remember to say Jimmy instead of Jim or whatever, right? But you get used to it pretty quickly, right? I think that the same thing would go with neopronouns. But if somebody's nickname was, I don't know, shitface, you know, chances are you probably wouldn't respect that in most contexts, right? You know, it's like, okay, if you're at a business meeting, like who is gonna respect that nickname? Probably nobody, right? But it's not because of, you know, it's not based on whether or not it meets a certain set of criteria. You just have to judge it on a case-by-case basis. And this is something that I wish DemonMama had explained in the debate that we're reviewing right now, but I don't think she does. So DemonMama, if you're watching that, or if you're watching this, and maybe this is an argument she's made in different debates, feel free to take notes. I know. I truly am the greatest debate lord of all time. Now, in all seriousness, I think that obviously, because I'm not on the spot right now, even though I'm a little bit on the tired side, you know, obviously I'm going to be able to make better arguments, right? And obviously, she didn't have to really try to win a debate against me at the time, right?
Obviously, slurs can't be pronouns, but what about, like...
Well, I think they can be. I think that slurs can be pronouns. I just don't know that anybody would respect that.
Well, yes. And she makes a similar point. But if she had worded it with something along the lines of, think of it as like a nickname, right? Like, anything can be a nickname. But even though you don't have a specific set of criteria for what is and isn't a nickname, or what should or shouldn't be allowed to be a nickname, you know, you still respect people's nicknames usually, right?
Well, yeah, I know I wouldn't...
And she would have completely destroyed my argument if she had said that. Not that she didn't destroy my argument in this debate, because I hardly had one, and it was one of my first debates, and, you know, I had no experience going against someone who was actually experienced a debate, but, you know.
I respect that, because that's...
Yeah, I mean, but usually there's contextual reasons for why somebody wouldn't respect, like, a slur pronoun, right?
Right.
Like, it's just that, like, somebody is saying you're clearly just trying to be an asshole.
That's
and
true.
You're trying to be offensive, and I don't respect that. And
see, I think that the way I phrased it, you know, just now was better than what DemonMama said. Again, you know, it doesn't take much to beat me in a debate back then if you're experienced, but still. I think that my argument is stronger, and I think it makes more sense to anybody that isn't already on board, if that makes sense.
And I think that's a valid thing to say.
Okay, that's
like,
true.
I joked about this in the past, that it's the Giga Chad position of saying, like, oh, yeah, well, if you believe in neopronouns, well, I guess I'm Nazi, not self then. And then you just go, well, I don't respect Nazis, so fuck you.
See, but the problem there is I'm still looking for a definitive cutoff point for what is and isn't an acceptable pronoun, right? Again, that's why the nickname analogy is so perfect, right? Because again, then the burden of proof would be on me to prove, oh, here's why nicknames are categorically different. Here's how here's a cutoff point for nicknames that doesn't apply to neopronouns, or here's why nicknames shouldn't have to have a specific set of criteria, but neopronouns should, right? And I would have to explain that, but I don't have to explain that.
It's that simple. Like,
that's
isn't
actually
that kind of like...
Yeah, and I'm not saying...
That's simple, right? Like, what's the... People... I think in these pronoun discussions that a lot of people are looking for some sort of, like, universal single answer that...
Yeah, and I kind of was. That was what I was looking for, right?
You can have for all pronouns, but I just don't think that there is that very easily. I think that we should respect people when, you know, we should respect people's identity and their desire to be referred to the way they want to be referred.
I agree with DemonMama here, by the way. It were not as of that debate occurring, but like currently, you know, as I'm rewatching this, I agree with her position here, right? I think it's generally good to just be respectful of people. I think it serves more utility, like I said.
Referred to. And if somebody is clearly engaging in bad faith, or at least you come to that conclusion, then you just say that that's what you think.
So yeah, it's sort of, and I hate this as an answer, but it is kind of just vibes based. Again, same way you would, you know, determine whether or not you're gonna respect somebody's nickname, right?
There's
Judge
anything
it.
wrong with that.
So instead of, like, and this is a terrible argument on my end as well, instead of trying to find a definitive cutoff point, which I think is fallacious, I should have been arguing against neopronouns conceptually, right? In terms of whether or not they serve utility, right? If I'm going to take an anti-neopronouns approach, then I shouldn't be arguing against specific examples of it, because not all neopronouns are equal. The same way not all nicknames are equal, right? So I should have, but again, and this is part of why I've changed my position anyways, right?
So judge it on a case-by-case basis?
If you want to, yeah. I just
Okay.
make the argument that there's no harm being done if somebody says, like, let's pick an example that some people tend to have problems with. Like,
Yes, there's no harm being done. And this is the other reason I'm not against it anymore, right? Because I realized that, oh shit, I'm going against something that I've been saying, or like almost asserting as sort of like an axiom to build my arguments off of, which is that every single action is justified until there's a logical reason for it not to be. And you'll know, and you'll hear me say this in the debate I had with Hunter, because yeah, I realized, you know, during the debate with DemonMama, or not during, but afterwards, I'm like, oh, I'm actually kind of a hypocrite here, right? There is no objective or measurable harm, so why am I arguing against it? It's like, oh, okay, well, I'm going against one of my own axioms that I've asserted in other debates. That's not fair of me to do. Well, why should it be obligatory here but not here?
bun self or tree self.
Yeah.
Or whatever. Like some people don't like those. And
Yeah, I mean, it does make me uncomfortable. I'm not gonna lie, right? Like, it's still, I hear that and I'm like, ooh, that feels weird, right? But again, just because something makes me uncomfortable, or you know, it's weird or whatever, like, that's not an argument against it, right? A lot of things are weird. That doesn't mean that they're inherently wrong, right? Some people think that trans people are weird. Some people think femboys are weird, you know? That doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with being trans or being a femboy, right?
I ask them why, and they go, well, because I think it's cringe. And I go, well, I don't think that's a very good reason to not like that. I don't think
That, yes, I agree. That is a terrible reason, right? And ultimately, that is probably, well, you know, the line of reasoning of the majority of people that are against it, right? Not all of them, right? Some might have more logical arguments, right? But
think they're doing anyone harm, and I don't think that it's really that difficult for you to respect somebody's, you know, desired pronouns. And also, if I'm completely real, on a purely experiential basis, not to be an anecdote Andy over here,
Right.
but like I've never encountered someone who is like makes a big deal about people not using their neopronouns, like
nor have I.
Yeah.
and I know a lot of people. I've seen people like write on their personal Twitters, like, it frustrates me that nobody respects my neopronouns, but I've literally never seen anybody actually get all that mad about it.
She's not wrong here, but I think that this is kind of a side tangent. Because again, but a part of it is my fault as well. Because really what we should be talking about is, you know, neopronouns as a fundamental concept, right? It is a linguistic argument at the end of the day, and a philosophical one, right? So talking about, you know, specific examples, I don't think gets either of us anywhere, right?
What I do see people get mad at is when, like, I don't know, like a streamer who thinks that, like, a self-important streamer sort of stands up and is like, "Heh, I'm not going to respect you if you use pronouns that I don't like."
Yeah, that's
where they're like
stupid,
announcing.
Yeah. See, even back then I knew that was dumb, right? It's like, okay, legit, who gives a shit?
To the world.
Yeah, that's
but like
bullshit,
that's
yeah.
And notice how back then I'm like, yeah, that's bullshit, right? I think that the main thing I disagreed with was, I think it was mainly an ideological disagreement more than anything, right? I don't think that in terms of, you know, the practical applications, right? I don't think that there was even as much of a disagreement as you would think.
Generally, where this, but isn't that where most of this discourse ends up like coming from?
This is a kind of a fallacious argument on her end, right? I'm not most of the discourse, right? So now she's, for whatever reason, arguing against not me, but other people that have different arguments against neopronouns, as if that's somehow an argument against me. So I'm not a fan of that. I don't think I noticed it back then, but oof, not the best argument.
Is that some asshole stands up and goes, if you use pronouns that I don't like, then fuck you. And then
yeah, but that's not what I was doing, so why even bring it up?
somebody else goes, well, that seems kind of shitty.
Yeah.
And then they go, whoa, now I'm being canceled. And that seems to be like the eternal cycle. So
Right. Well, and for me, the way I see it is, yeah, no, you shouldn't be like bullying people over something like that. You shouldn't be like calling them out and being like, "Wow, what an idiot," or anything like that. I think for me at least, it just comes from like, and maybe and you know, maybe it's just I just don't have a good enough understanding of why people use neopronouns. Which
I still don't have a very good understanding of it, right? But again. Just because I don't understand something does not mean that it is inherently wrong or objectively bad, right? Like, my cognition is not the ultimate arbiter of truth, unfortunately. I mean, obviously it is, but that's besides the point, alright? Let's be real. I'm sorry.
Which I'll admit, it's just generally when I'm, like, referring to someone, you know, and maybe this is just I think what my actual position is I should be able to use they, them pronouns for everybody, because I already kind of do that.
Yeah. See, and this is sort of... This is what I mean, right? It's like, it took me that long to get there, right? And even then, I do a terrible job explaining it, right? I go on to explain, oh, well, I, sort of flip-flop between he, him, and they, them for, like, a cisgender dude, right? As an example, right? It's like, okay, well, just because I'm already doing something does not mean it's inherently better or worse, right? That's called a habit. Habits are neutral, so I'm not making an argument here. It would have been much better if I had said, well, they, them pronouns are gender neutral, which means that they don't denote anything, meaning that they can be all-encompassing, but I don't make that argument. So, yeah.
Sometimes, like, I'll switch back and forth, like, even for, like a cis guy, for example, like, sometimes I'll use he, him, and sometimes I use they, them, like, without even, like, realizing it, unless I'm, like, paying attention to what I'm saying. So, like,
I still do this, by the way, but that's not an argument. That's just, oh, here's what I do, lol. Like, that's fucking terrible. I don't know if she calls me out on it. I hope she does.
Like, I feel like, so, I don't know, like, is that, like,
To be fair, though, I wasn't very good at debate back then. I mean, I was above average for somebody who didn't debate, but you could say I was talented, but I wasn't very good.
bad thing? Because...
Well, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I mean, I think
Okay.
that's just like, I think people sort of, I think it's a generally like a fine thing to like default to they, them as like a gender neutral, because
Okay, yeah, that's valid.
it is, they, them is pretty gender neutral, but I don't know that there's any issue with that. Like,
Yeah.
is there really anybody who's mad about using they, them? I think the problem arises like,
So, alright. I think this is where there was some miscommunication, right? So notice how she just said, I don't think there's a problem, anyone has a problem with the, people using they, them, right? So I think that if I was better at communicating what I believed, and I was better at articulating my points, if I had articulated it the way I do now, by saying, well, I believe that they, them pronouns are gender neutral, and therefore all-encompassing of all gender identities, potentially, right? Because it doesn't denote anything. It is non-specific, right? And then if I had established that I'm not against neopronouns, but that I was against obligatory neopronouns where that's the only option, which I did establish at the start of the debate, but I feel like that sort of just got lost somewhere. Again, I'm not, and again, I'm playing devil's advocate here a lot, or at least right now I am, not during the debate. And during the debate, I'm just being 100% good faith, right? That was even back then, you know. I wasn't so bad, right? I was still, you know, you get the point.
When
And I'm still willing to change my position on something if somebody else makes a better argument.
people say, "Hey, my pronouns are bun self," and then a bunch of other people pop in and are like, "Oh, wow, you're cringe. I think you're dumb." And then it's like, okay. And then you
Yeah, but that was never my argument, so I don't know why she's saying that. Like, I don't know. I think maybe, and maybe this is just her way of explaining why, you know, she would be hesitant to listen to the opposing side, because most of the time it is probably like that, but there's a difference between me and any other opposition, right? But obviously, you know, from an outside perspective, you know, how would she have made that categorical distinction? She couldn't have. She's not a mind reader, and I wasn't articulating my points very well. So, yeah.
you get to like the absurdist positions, which unfortunately are slightly popular in certain spaces online, where it's like the idea that like neopronouns are going to destroy language as we know it, and that it's
Yeah,
like
that's
it's
stupid.
dissolving our ability.
Yeah, no, I agree with DemonMama, right? Like, yeah, that is stupid, but that was not my argument. So, again, I don't really know why it's relevant. Whether or not other people, you know, make too big of a deal out of it and are, like, annoying about it or really shitty, that doesn't make it any more or less valid, right? You know, if somebody on Twitter is harassing somebody else for having neopronouns, that's shitty, but that does not determine whether or not neopronouns as a concept are valid. So I don't really like this style of argumentation.
Which is just insanity. If
Yeah.
your language structure is so weak that it's dissolved by like people questioning the way that like pronouns are used, I think that's a very weak argument personally.
Yeah, I don't know how many people make that argument. I'm sure that it's an argument people have made, you know, while talking to DemonMama, and maybe that's where it's coming from, but, you know, you got owned. Yeah, no, I agree. I didn't do well in that debate, right? It was an old debate, so it was one of my first. Hello, God of Hyperspace. Welcome to the stream, everybody. Welcome. But, Zers and it's is fine to me. Yeah, it's like, you know, the answer to why should I is that because you have been asked to. That's how I think of it. No, I don't really think that that's a good argument either. The reason being because you can ask anybody to do anything, right? Whether or not somebody asks me to do something does not determine, you know, whether or not their request is valid, right? Now, if somebody asks me to do something, and it is not to, you know, my own detriment, right? And there's no objective or measurable harm, and, you know, I don't lose anything, then I don't see a logical reason for me not to, right? That's why I'm willing to respect, you know, neopronouns when they're reasonable, like zers or its, right? Like, it's still one syllable, right? I might be bad at remembering. I might slip up and accidentally default to they, them every now and again. But I think as long as I'm, like, trying in good faith, I think that that's all that, you know, they would really care about, right? You know, I think that that's, it's not like they're gonna be, like, unhinged. I'm sure there's one person out there in the world that's unhinged. But, like, that goes for any group of people. But yeah. No, I don't think... obviously, I wasn't as good at debate back then.
I agree with that. Like, that's like, I'm not like a dumb, like, conservative reactionary or anything. Like, I don't like, it's not
No,
gonna
no,
just,
no,
it's like, I'm aware that it's like a non-issue. I like to argue about things in a more like abstract sense, if that makes.
Yeah, which I thought was obvious. I still think it was obvious, but I could have been wrong there, right? You know, maybe she wasn't able to distinguish between me and a reactionary conservative, right? I don't know. You know, and part of it may have been that she wasn't, you know,
willing to, take my arguments seriously, which I don't blame her. I wasn't articulating them very well. But, makes sense. Like, I don't even know, like,
Sure.
I feel like I guess this is more of like something that I see as like a discussion rather. I will say that as the debate goes on, I think she starts to realize that I'm not there arguing in bad faith or being a reactionary. And maybe this is and from her perspective, because she doesn't know me, at least not at the time. I could just be moving the goalpost from what I actually believe, right? I could be doing the Tim Pool thing, where I pretend to be more centrist than I actually am, when I'm just the opposition, right? So, she doesn't know how good of faith I'm arguing in, right? At least not right away. So I think that might be also, part of why it turned out this way. Rather than an argument, because I don't, I'm not even, entirely sure what my position is for the most part. Like, I am and I'm not.
Okay.
I think at this point, when I admit that I haven't made up my mind entirely, I think that's when she realizes that I'm arguing in good faith, right? Because before then, it's like, oh, well, I'm not making my position clear. That can be seen as weaselly, and she might have thought that I was being weaselly on purpose, and I wasn't, right? It's just that I genuinely was, trying to figure out what my position was, as I was going through the debate, which is a terrible idea. It's like, well, I started out knowing what my position was, but it wasn't that well thought. I mean, it was well thought out, but not really, and I didn't articulate it very well. And then I'm, okay, well, better arguments are being made than what I'm making, so maybe that's the wrong position. I'm a mess, right, in this debate. I feel like...
I mean, I think it's good to have, to be willing to revise your position, and to talk about... I think that's a healthy thing to do.
I mean... Yep. And I think that's the point where she realized, yep. I think one of your videos, changed my stance on, xenogender, to be honest. I mean, I found you, a couple weeks ago, yeah. And I think ultimately, So the reason that, she had convinced me on xenogender but not neopronouns, the reason that they're categorically different, right, is because xenogender is basically, just how somebody refers to themselves, right? Neopronouns would be how, other people refer to somebody, right? So that's why I still see it as, categorically slightly different, right? Because with neopronouns, for instance, you actively have to, use certain pronouns that you otherwise wouldn't use, right? So that's why... So that's sort of what my thought process was, right? Because when we use language, it's generally used to communicate something. So astute observation, Femyoz, you absolute genius. If I am strictly using somebody's neopronouns, then I feel like I am failing to use the English language to accomplish that, because most... That's an awful argument. No, you wouldn't be failing to use the English language at all. There's not an objectively, there's not one objectively correct set of pronouns, and anything else is off limits or incorrect, right? Now, I think the argument I was trying to make is, oh, well, it would be awkward if I was talking about somebody and I was in public and the person I was talking to didn't know the neopronouns of the person I was talking about, right? That was what I was kind of, trying to say, but I was doing a piss poor job. Most people aren't really aware of, they don't think about it. They're gonna get confused, and... This is a terrible point. It's bad because it might confuse people. This is tantamount to people saying that, oh, we gotta keep the woke gender ideology out of schools because it's gonna confuse kids, right? Whether or not something... people get confused by all sorts of dumb shit, right? Just because something is confusing doesn't mean it's bad or should be avoided at all costs, right? Maybe I am not in the mood to explain to every person every single time, oh yeah, by the way, also this person uses neopronouns. Their neopronouns are bun self. Well, if the person you're talking to, doesn't know what the person's pronouns are, I think in that case it would be fine to use they them, right? Because it's sort of like a depersonalized thing. The way I see neopronouns, while I still don't understand them, I see them as something that's very personalized, right? So if you're talking about somebody to somebody that has no idea who that person is, then it's not going to communicate anything, right? If you just say they, them. You're just being really vague and ambiguous, right? But if you're talking to somebody that knows who that person is, then it makes more sense to use neopronouns, right? Again, you have to judge it on a case-by-case basis, right? So that's why I'm using, I feel like, and then, just that, awkward,
Well, to be fair, I think there's
it's awkward, so it's bad.
There's
Alright.
a precedent for there's a precedent for that sort of thing. Journalists have written successfully. They just at the beginning say the person's name and then their pronouns, and then they consistently use those pronouns throughout.
That's true. I think she could have gone if she wanted to, and I think that she could have, she could have gone hard against that point. She could have asked me some real hard-hitting questions, so it's bad because it's awkward, right? Just very, very, very direct. But I think she knows that I'm kind of not really sure what to think, right? So I do appreciate that, because if it was me, if I was debating my past self, I would have gone hard, right? It's oh, so it's bad because it's awkward, or because it's confusing, Oh, well, conservatives say gender ideology broadly is confusing. Why is that categorically different? Who gets to dictate what is and isn't confusing? And where do you draw the line?
So,
True.
I mean...
I would especially ask where you draw the line, because one of my main arguments in this debate was oh, well, where would you draw the line for when it is or isn't okay to use pronouns? That was something I said. Right? Obviously, that's a stupid argument, but according to my own standards, right? It's oh, well, you can't find a line to draw, so I guess your point's invalid, right? And I probably would have brought that up.
Yeah, I think it is possible without...
if I was in DemonMama's position, I would bring that up.
Without being too intrusive. And I also think that people are...
But I think part of it is because, I'm very straightforward and kind of, abrasive with how I debate, right? I just,
Well, okay, people are both stupider and smarter than you expect them to be. That's a lesson that I've learned in my life, which is that people are incredibly deliberately ignorant and giant assholes about things, but people can...
This is true. A lot of people will deliberately misinterpret things or interpret things in bad faith. It happens all the time. I see it from woke scolds, and I see it from conservatives, right?
Usually pick up what's going on pretty easily.
In fact, this is something that I believe so heavily, funnily enough, right? The fact that people deliberately misinterpret things, and I'm so against it that I've even gone as far as to say the N-word in the context of making a linguistic claim and saying, what the actual message I'm saying is. You know what I'm saying. You're just choosing to, misinterpret the obvious message. You have to be a bad faith actor to misinterpret it, right? So, it doesn't have, me saying it had hardly anything to do with the word itself, right? Now, it's something I'll do really pretty sparingly, but still. You sort of get the point, right? It's not about the syllables being pronounced that make it wrong to say that word. It's about the message you're sending. And in that very specific context, the message I was sending is that it's not about the syllables. Here's an example of that right in front of you, right? And the reason I did that is so that I can reference when I did that, right? Now, I'd rather not say it very often because, one, I like money, and two, it's generally bad to say. I don't want it to be something that everyone just sort of uses all willy-nilly, right? That's never going to be my intent, right?
If they like, I think people's brains recognize what a pronoun, the like function of a pronoun in a sentence better than most people would realize.
Yeah, and again, yeah, it is sort of a vibes-based argument, like, oh, does it sound like it's correct? And it's like, well, this sounds like it's probably a neopronoun, I'll bet. Yeah, I'll use it. Or, oh, that sounds like the N-word. Maybe I'm not going to use that one, right? It's like, okay.
Yeah, so
That's true.
yeah, I guess I don't see. What I do see is I see a lot of people very angry about neopronouns, and I see people using neopronouns as like a vector by which they can create cringe, like anti-SJW cringe content, which is really just anti-trans content.
I'm
but
not
I don't
for
actually
that, yeah.
see. Yeah, and I don't actually.
So, yeah, at this point, it's become less of a debate and more of a discussion. So,
actually
yeah.
see any actual issues from people
I think it'll go back to being more of a debate at some point, right?
who use neopronouns. I know a lot of people who use neopronouns IRL, and it's never been that big of an issue. And
That is correct. It's a non-issue. And that's why I have no issues respecting people, right? It doesn't hurt me to do. I don't lose anything by doing it. I'm more likely to lose something by not doing it, right? Because then it's like, oh, well, now that person feels invalidated. And now I feel really shitty about myself because I just treated somebody like shit for no reason, right? So it's like,
never had.
I'd say it's probably mutually beneficial if I just respect people. But that's the main reason that, that doesn't mean that I think it makes sense, right? So if I'm going to talk about it conceptually, I don't have a logical argument in favor of it. However, if we're going to talk about, practical applications or, assuming that, yeah, there are going to be a few people that use this, even though I don't understand it, that, like, them using neopronouns is just a given. So if that's a given, what would be the more logical action? For me to disrespect them or for me to respect them? Well, it's probably mutually beneficial if I just respect them, because then they respect me back, and I feel better, I don't feel guilty for hurting somebody's feelings, etc.
Like I said, I know quite a lot of people, so like I've never had an issue where anybody gets like super freaked out about it or anything. It's always been pretty casual and easy.
That's also true. And because I'm arguing against worst case scenario of like, oh, it's like somebody's like getting mad because I'm not using their neopronouns type of thing. It's like, okay, I think that the argument that I kind of just made just now, I think would be applicable there.
Easy to deal with. So I don't know. That's sort of why I have the position I do on neopronouns. It's just like I don't use neopronouns. I use she, her. I'm I'm like I'm a boomer in that way, I guess. But that's just for me personally. I'm satisfied personally with she, her pronouns, but I can understand why other people might not be, and also why people might want to challenge, why people might feel called to like, change their identity in that way, or challenge the identity that's been given to them in that way.
Okay, so personally, here's my hot take. I don't think that pronouns should be a part of an identity. Now, obviously, we're not there yet, right? But it would be nice if everybody just went by they, them, right? In an ideal world, everyone would go by they, them pronouns. The reason being because I don't think that pronouns should be a way of categorizing people. I think that it should just be an easy way to speak referentially of them, so you're not repeating their name over and over again, right? Because if it's non-specific, then you're not saying anything about the person, meaning that you actually have to sort of get to know the person instead of just making assumptions automatically about them, right? Because when it comes to how we use language and categorize people, when we use she, her, or he, him pronouns on somebody, we're categorizing them in a way where we think of them differently almost, right? Because we're putting them in a box in our own minds, right? So we might treat them differently without even realizing it because of how people in each box act on average, right? and you make certain assumptions about them that may or may not be true, because on average, maybe they are true, right? But then there are going to be exceptions to that as well, right? And I don't think that people should be treated differently based on whether or not, you know, they have, like, again, like, whether or not they use a certain set of pronouns, right? I don't think that that should denote character, right? It should be ambiguous. That would be ideal, right? I don't even think that it serves any utility for there to be any pronouns outside of they, them pronouns. I don't even think that she, her, or he, him pronouns need to exist. Ideally, they wouldn't exist. At least in my worldview. Because then it's like, oh, okay, now I don't have to... Now, you know, people actually have to, like, get to know each other to make judgments, right? At the end of the day, I want to, you know, not have to give a shit about gender broadly, right? I'd rather just judge people individually as individuals, right? But I guess we're not there yet as a society, it seems.
I get.
And maybe you could argue that that might be the point of neopronouns as well. I don't know if I agree with that or not, but, like, you could say, oh, well, it's, you know, a way of saying, okay, well, since we're, you know, being categorized arbitrarily and people are making judgments, you know, based on that, you know, because it's, like, these non-specific judgments, right, or boxes that we're being put in, here's a box that I made. Oh, now, you know, if you're going to categorize me, the way you categorize me is actually going to be accurate, right?
Yes.
It is also like a...
I feel like for
Go ahead.
me, like, I
Now, the counter-argument to that would be, okay, but the lack of a categorization that they, them pronouns would denote would mean that you could fit into any category, including the category that you just stated, right? So that would be the counter-argument to that.
I kind of like, I don't know, like, I like being able to just, like, I think, and maybe this is because I'm kind of, like, a gender abolitionist in a lot of ways, but, like, the reason why I want to at least have the option to use they, them pronouns for everybody is because I don't want to have to care about gender, right?
This is still kind of true. That doesn't mean that I'm not going to respect people's pronouns, but yeah, generally I'd rather just use they, them for everybody. You know, it's easier. I think that in the long run it would serve more utility, etc. Why do pronouns need to be something that denotes a person's character or gender identity? It's illogical. It doesn't make any sense.
It's like,
I like, gendered pronouns are, like, what, seriously, what utility does it serve to have gendered pronouns? I would love to know. Oh wait, it really doesn't, right? It's just a way of putting people, it's a way of ascribing arbitrary boxes to people that they might not even fit in.
I feel like,
Sure.
I feel like ultimately, and this is the main argument that I had against, even just, like, xenogender, and at the end of the day, like, the reason I agree with you is because it's really a non-issue, but I guess in a more abstract sense, my position kind of, now, I'm fine with people being a xenogender because it's not necessarily a negative thing, it's more of a, oh, I don't really get this type of thing, if that...
Okay, but that also applies to neopronouns, right? You're not gonna die if you say Zzer or whatever, right? You're gonna be fine.
That makes sense.
Sure.
Is if the goal is to make gender irrelevant, then what is the point of creating more boxes instead of saying, we don't need boxes, we're above that?
Well, I think that the counter-argument to that, and this is actually a good question. This is the first time I'm actually doing kind of a decent job, right? Even though it took me forever to get there. Finally, a decent question from me. So I think that the answer to this question is that I am using you know, if I'm going to make a prescriptive claim about what the end goal is, I shouldn't be able to, like, I'm using that to justify, you know, acting a certain way within the current system, right? I can't just pretend like the current way we use words doesn't exist, right? People do categorize other people, whether I like it or not. I can say that it's wrong or that I don't like it all I want, but that's not going to stop anybody, right? So if people are, you know, going to categorize you no matter what, or you know, you may, I guess the argument would be, oh, okay, well, here's a category that I like, that applies to me as an individual. I think that's sort of where it comes from, right? I'm not sure how she'll explain it. I think I know, but I'm not entirely sure.
Well, I think okay, so there's a couple of ways that I could approach this. And keep in mind that, again, I am not somebody who identifies as xenogender, or I don't really use that personally. But I think to be charitable, and I think one way is that I think that people find freedom from a system that demands that you pick a box, like, constantly. Like, our
she actually does make a similar argument to what I just said.
System is constantly telling you, pick a box, pick a box, pick a box, pick a box. And then they say, fine, then I will pick my own box then. And then people get really mad about that. And it's like, well, I thought you wanted me to pick a box. How come you get to pick your random box that has whatever the hell you want on it? Like, if you look at...
well, okay. But, okay, wait, hold on. Let me rewind that last part. Hold on.
And then people get really mad about that. And it's like, well, I thought you wanted me to pick a box. How come you get to pick your random box that has whatever the hell you want on it? Like, if you...
Wait, what? So wait, is she referring to, like, the, you know, the boxes that already do exist under our societally accepted? Because those wouldn't be random. I think the argument there would be you don't really get to choose them as much as you should be able to. Or maybe I'm just misinterpreting this. I don't know.
You look at, like, for example, the definition of man. Every single person on the planet has a different definition of man. And, like, if you talk to a, like, fundamentalist Christian versus, like, a liberal, what they define manhood as is going to be very different from one another.
True. There are multiple ways of achieving gender abolition, right? One way, and this is the first way I kind of began to understand a long time ago, actually, is expanding the boxes that denote gender. Because if you expand them infinitely, then they overlap each other infinitely, and they are functionally the same. You are not restricted by them. The second way is to just remove the boxes entirely, and then do whatever the fuck you want. The third way is to create infinitely many boxes, whatever size you want, because then they all overlap, and then it's a clusterfuck, and then it means nothing because it's just delved into absurdity. And I think that's what DemonMama is gonna argue. I think. Because if something stuck with me, it would be that.
Even though a liberal and a fundamentalist Christian might both agree that gender is, like, binary. You know, most liberals aren't like super into non-binary. Like, they don't have like a strong view, but that's nonetheless true. So they're like, liberals and conservatives alike are taking a box and they're painting whatever the hell they want on it, but then they're saying that anybody else is wrong for it. So when
Oh, okay, that's interesting. So they're painting whatever the hell they want on you know, the box that is, you know, the man box or the woman box, right? So they're taking the two boxes that they recognize and painting them however they want. Okay. But then not giving the option for alternative boxes. Okay, I think that's a fair point.
I look at a xenogender person who's like, I made my own box, I put whatever I wanted on it, why are you so mad? I think they have a point. I think they have a good point, actually. They're pointing something out. Now, in the long run, well, also, like, the other part of this is that I have no desire to, like, control the way that people express themselves.
Yeah, me neither. This is another reason why I changed my position, right? I think that here, at this point, you know, after I asked a good question, I think DemonMama did a really good job in this part, specifically, right? It started off as, like, more like just not taking this seriously, but I think, you know, this part of the debate, I think she does a really good job.
While I would love to move towards a world in which gender is functionally abolished, like, yeah. I don't desire to do that by telling people how they should identify.
Okay, so we agree on that.
You move past that by breaking that. Well, yeah, absolutely. But, like, like xenogender people aren't saying that other people are xenogender. They're saying
Yeah.
this is my way of expressing. So like when I think that's a valid path to getting to a point where we no longer use gender as like a way to categorize the world or to categorize people.
Yeah, I agree. And again, I personally, I'd rather there just not be categorization. So, you know, if I'm, you know, but there would be a double standard, right? That I would have to be like, oh, okay, I'm fine respecting these two categories that society has arbitrarily decided are relevant and worthy of being recognized, but all of these other categories that can be made, none of those are acceptable, right? And I would be kind of a hypocrite if that were to be how I, you know, if that was my stance, especially because I'm not somebody who believes that whether or not something is right, it should be dictated by what a plurality believes, right? That's just appealing to, you know, but like that's like a very fallacious way of thinking, right? Is, oh, well, most people think this, so it must be right. Most people used to think that the earth was flat. Obviously, they weren't correct, right? So, now, if I decided I'm not going to recognize gender, period, right? And that includes the categories of man and woman, then I would be consistent there in that belief. So, I think I have to toe a fine line in order to be consistent. I don't know, maybe that's just me. Yeah, you're a lot more articulate now than you used to be. Why, thank you. Hello, chat, who were you debating? So, a while ago, I debated DemonMama on the topic of neopronouns, and then a little less while ago, but still a little bit of a while ago, I debated Hunter Avallone, because they have opposite positions. But welcome to the stream, Toki. Hello, in League with Satan, welcome. Hello, Olivia Bean. I definitely agree with you. By using they, them pronouns for everyone, you'll end up misgendering those who don't identify by those pronouns. Yeah, so I believe that, I think that I still believe that they, them pronouns can be all-encompassing. But they're not always used that way, which is the problem, right? So if I refer to specifically a trans woman, let's say, only using they, them pronouns, then I'm indirectly sending a message, because what that sounds like to them is I'm avoiding gender affirmation, right? If I constantly use they, them. Now if I flip-flop between she, her, and they, them, then they probably won't get that impression, right? But it's because conservatives have a tendency to do that passive-aggressively, where they will only use they, them pronouns when talking about, a binary trans person, and then they'll just use the wrong pronouns when they're talking about a non-binary trans person, of course, right? And they'll do that, right? And it might be hard to tell if I have a different set of motivations, right? Because they might not know me very well, right? So even though I can make prescriptive claims about the way the world should be, I base how I act off of how the world currently is, and, maybe how I can get it closer to where I want it to be, right? But that doesn't mean that I automatically get to act as if I'm in the world that I have made up as a prescriptive claim, right? I still have to acknowledge the way the world currently is and act, based on that to an extent, right? Otherwise, it's just an obvious denial of reality, and if you deny reality, then you can't fix real-world issues. The debate that brought me to your stream. Oh, yeah! I think, you were a DemonMama viewer, and then that's how you found my shit. Problem is, humans love to categorize. You can't really stop humans from using language that way entirely. No, of course not. Of course not. I just think that because pronouns are used so widely that it would be better if at least pronouns weren't used to categorize people, right? And, you know, I'm somebody who goes out of my way to be uncategorizable. Is that even a word? It's really not. I guarantee it's not. But I go out of my way to be uncategorizable, okay? I mean, well, you can categorize me in some ways. You can say I'm a femboy, but, like, I'm some people would say that I'm a man, and I don't care. It doesn't make me mad if they say that. So then conservatives, get mad, and they're like, well, you're not a real man, though. And I'm like, okay, fair enough. I guess I'm a woman or non-binary then. And then they get mad because it doesn't affect me. So it's like, because they're not able to categorize me, I think that kind of screws with them. And I think it's very funny that it screws with them, right? And the fact that I'm indifferent gives me power that I wouldn't otherwise have. My indifference is like a shield almost, right? It's a way of not only making conservatives mad, because they can't make me mad or offend me, but I think it also just illustrates that I'm above the concept of gender, right? I think that's why using any and all pronouns serves utility, right? And that's why I do it, because I think it serves utility, right? To be like, well, it doesn't matter. It's meaningless. It doesn't mean shit to me, all right? I'm above the concept of gender. You can categorize me however you want, but don't get mad when I don't adhere to your arbitrary categorization of me, right? And then make that very clear. But yes, I appreciate you, Gilded Fox, say I'm a lot more articulate than I used to be. You better believe I am. Best you can do is give people the freedom to categorize in a way that works for them and those around them. Yeah, exactly. Like, that's why I'm willing to respect people, even though it doesn't make very much sense to me, right? It's like, okay. As to why you would use neopronouns. It's like, okay. But I don't, I don't single-handedly dictate what does and doesn't make other people happy, right? Whether or not I think something is logical does not determine whether or not somebody else should have to adhere to that, because at the end of the day, if there is something harmless that is illogical that makes somebody happy, what utility would it serve to prevent them from having that? You're a good bean who's entertaining and fosters a pretty wholesome community overall. That's all I needed to know. Well, I'm glad to hear that. I always like hearing that I'm entertaining and that my community is mostly good. Because, I mean, that is something that I've done deliberately, right? Is have a mostly good community. Occasionally there's a passerby who might be conservative to debate me, but again, that's not really someone in my community, right?
I think that, like, there is a what's the right word for this? There's a word I keep reaching for a word from a leftist theorist, which is called destituent power, is what they use, which is like basically undermining power by making it irrelevant. So
yeah, in a way, xenogender, it is, or xenogender and or neopronouns, in a way, can be used as a satirical argument against gender broadly. It's a way of showing that, yeah, this is fucking absurd. It's a way of taking this concept of arbitrarily categorizing people to its logical conclusion, right? Neopronouns and whatnot are, in a sense, the logical conclusion of what most people believe in terms of gender. They just aren't aware of it, right? So I think that, and the more I think about it, right, like the more I can make sense of it to an extent in terms of the motivation behind it, right? And, as somebody who likes some good satire, I respect that. Now, ultimately, because that isn't my standard, because I'm not most of society, maybe
I might not see it as something that is obligatory for me, right? Though I will still respect it. I don't think it's obligatory for me because I'm above the concept of gender and categorizing people that way. Maybe in my mind, I might still categorize them that way. In some instances, because old habits die hard, and because I'm still able to recognize the way society categorizes people. But I'm not going to treat somebody any differently, really, solely based on what their gender identity is or what pronouns they use, right? I'm going to treat everybody the same until I get to know them more, and then I'll, cater to them specifically as an individual, right? Because at the end of the day, different people need different things, but it's not based on their gender identity. I mean, sure, that can be, they might need different things in terms of averages, right? But every individual is going to be different, There's so much variation, even within the category of men. There's so much variation that it means fucking nothing, right? It's just like this vague, ambiguous term, right? It doesn't really, and because I'm willing to look at it in a way where it's like, okay, it is a term that exists, that society recognizes it, but it doesn't have any power over me.
Gender is this massively relevant structure that forces us to behave in all kinds of ways, that changes the way that our bathrooms are structured, changes the way that our
That's true, and that is something that pisses me off. I don't think that there should be gendered well, or maybe there should, but I don't think that, I don't know. Like, that's, yeah, the bathrooms thing is, at this point, like, yeah, it's annoying to me, right? Because I don't feel comfortable going in the men's restroom or the women's restroom. I feel like I don't belong in either, right? It's like, okay, the men's restroom, well, I don't know, maybe I get sexually assaulted, right? But it's like, oh, but I don't really pass as a woman, so people might be uncomfortable if I use the women's restroom, and they're gonna, like, whatever. And it's like, I don't know. So, like, it's like, it doesn't serve any utility, that's the thing, right? Ideally, that wouldn't be an issue. Ideally, every building would have a non-binary restroom, right? But, that's too good to be true, right?
Stores are structured. It changes the way that we engage with everything. Fuck, every website in the world makes you choose male, female. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, at this point, there's an option for other or non-binary a lot of the time, in all fairness. Not always.
like all of these aspects, and from the destitutive power, or from an approach of destituting that power. I'm stumbling over the word here for some reason, but
That's okay.
From that position, you can rob gender of its power by basically making it nonsensical.
Yeah, which is a very interesting point, right? It's like, okay, if I'm identifying a certain way to make a mockery of gender, right? I feel like as in, like, like I'm making fun of the fact, basically, that gender doesn't really make sense, right? I feel like, yeah, that seems like it could potentially serve utility. Now, I think that my approach is more effective. I think my approach of being like, I'm not even going to bother recognizing gender. I'm just going to do my own thing. Categorize me how you want. But, don't come crying to me when I, step out of line or whatever the fuck. Because I never adhered myself to any of that, right? I never obliged myself to, adhere to any category. Again, but yeah, no, I think it's interesting. I think it's interesting, right? It's like, okay, if gender is gonna be relevant, then I may as well show up. It's like, again, I still don't really get it, but there are reasons that people might have, right? And I think that the best reason for it, in my opinion, would be if you're making a satirical argument against gender, right? Now obviously that's not what everyone is going to use neopronouns for, but if I was going to use neopronouns, I would do it to make a satirical argument, right? Being like, yeah, this is stupid. Why do we categorize people this way, right? It's nonsensical. It's like, oh, so you acknowledge that it's arbitrary and nonsensical when it's a gender that you don't recognize, but as soon as it's one that's societally accepted, you believe that it does make sense simply because a plurality of people has arbitrarily decided so, right?
By pointing out that gender is already nonsensical and forcing people to go, why do I have to deal, like, what is this? Why are there all these pronouns? And then
Yeah, and I think that the only instance in which it might be valid to, not want to use like memorize a billion pronouns, let's say, or what, not a billion, but like, I think that the only instance in which it might be valid, and this is in theory. In practice, just be respectful to people, right? But in theory, is if you're willing, if you're willing to be ideologically consistent. So if you just don't give gender as a concept any recognition, and you just call everybody they, them, no matter what, then I think that at that point, you might have a case for why using neopronouns shouldn't be obligatory, right? If somebody asks you to, right? Why are you willing to recognize one gender that has been arbitrarily decided to be a gender by society, but because society hasn't arbitrarily decided that this is also a gender, it shouldn't be obligatory? Like, what is your standard here? Why should it be treated differently, right?
then all of a sudden gender is exposed. It's like it's revealed that gender was kind of bullshit to begin with. And
I wonder if that's why a lot of people that are conservatives or even centrists, get pretty mad about the neopronoun thing, because it does kind of poke a hole in their worldview. Now they're not going to acknowledge it; they don't realize it, but yeah, gender is a goofy ass concept, right? And it's like, here is people basically, kind of proving that it is a goofy ass concept by taking it to its logical conclusion or potential logical conclusions of it, right? It's like, oh, okay,
and it starts to lose its predictive power. If
Interesting.
you walk into
Now, I think that the reason that I, took the approach that I did is because I'm not most people, right? I don't like categorizing people based on gender, right?
to a space and you can no longer predict what sex, quote unquote, people are, which I assume you would agree that like sexing.
Well, I think that you already can't, at least not with 100% certainty, predict what anybody's sex is. For all you know, I could be intersex, or maybe I was born as a female, went on testosterone, and detransitioned. You don't know. You've never seen my genitalia.
The entire world, like basically walking into a room and going male, female, male, female, male, female. That's a bad thing.
Show me
right?
your genitals.
Like I assume we agree on that.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Exactly. Like we agree that that's a bad world, and that is the world that like fundamentalist Christians work for. Is a world where you can just walk into a room and because and women act a certain
and categorize somebody and their entire personality, into one of two boxes that are strict. That is the world that Christian fundamentalists want.
certain way, so you can always know who's the woman, you can always know who's the man. Women are submissive, they dress this way. Men are dominant, they dress this way.
Yeah, I hate that.
We agree that world is not good.
Yeah.
So honestly, okay. So you know how conservatives will oftentimes use neopronouns as an argument against LGBTQ plus issues broadly, right? I think it can be used for the opposite as well, now that I think of it, right? Because asking somebody to define why it's, or explain how it's categorically different for one set of pronouns that's societally accepted to be, obligatory, but not ones that are also, just as made, like, they're just as made up as ones that I could make up on the fly. So why are my made-up pronouns not obligatory? Is there a certain threshold or number of people that need to be on board with it? And if so, where's the cutoff point, right? Or is it just a vibes thing? In which case, okay, well, if it's just a vibes thing, then, like, what is the point of making these strict boxes and shoving people into them, right? If it's based on just vibes, then it should be a loose categorization where you don't expect anyone to adhere to anything, right? You acknowledge right away that, okay, there's a lot of exceptions, and they're valid, right?
If we agree that world is not good, maybe,
But if you're in favor of strict boxes, it's like, okay, well, if I don't fit into either of the strict boxes, here's my own strict box that just so happens to describe me as an individual, right? It's like, okay, but you're against that because it's categorically different somehow. And the only way that it's categorically different is, well, one set of pronouns are accepted by society while the other isn't. That's it. That's the only difference, right? So I think that could potentially be used as an argument against conservatism. Now, I don't think it's the best argument or the most rhetorically effective, but it's a point that I haven't really heard anybody make. And I kind of wish that people made it more, right? Now, normally you're not going to want to talk about neopronouns when talking to a conservative, because, like, you're still trying to convince them that binary trans people are valid. Okay, you haven't even gotten to non-binary people yet, let alone xenogender shit, right? But,
maybe a way to break that down is to destitute the power of gender by making it so that people can't walk into a room and go, they have to go, I don't know. And
see, and there are multiple ways of accomplishing that, right? So, for instance, as I described, I would rather there just be they, them pronouns universally for everybody, because then it would mean nothing. There wouldn't be a categorization, right? And then, yeah, when you look at people in a room that you don't know, you're going to be like, I don't know, and I don't know, because you don't know anything about them. Other than what? Their physical appearance, right? Like, I mean, come on.
And then it breaks down. It just goes, wow, gender really wasn't giving you anything to begin with. Do you see what I'm saying there?
Yeah. Well, and I think
does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. So I think ultimately it's a different approach that leads to the same outcome. I think the idea is
absolutely.
Okay, like my approach generally is just be indifferent to gender, just disregard any and all boxes, and just not give a shit. And then there's no box. The other approach that you're presenting here is more of a create infinitely many boxes, because then they all overlap each other, and then it basically functions as no box. So
exactly, you have to then for people to navigate the world, if people want to know about you, they have to ask you, like they should be to begin with. We probably shouldn't be, like we both said, we shouldn't be categorizing the world into genders that are based on sex, that are based on ridiculous stereotypes that also control your behavior.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I don't see any utility in the categorization existing in the first place.
So I think they are sort of two sides to the same blade. It's some people are like, well, if I have to.
And an interesting thing in chat, this was one of the few streams where I had chat on screen. Somebody said neopronouns definitely might have a place. It's not really negative nor positive in nature, it's just an alternative pronoun. But it's not something that has had the history of the history of standard quote-unquote pronouns. And I think that's a very interesting point that was made in chat that I didn't even see before. Which is, yeah, it's like, oh, it's categorically different based on whether or not it has historical precedent of being used. Well, that sounds like a dumb standard that I would make fun of in literally any other context. You see what I mean? It's like, okay, even though it's not in like intuitively obvious argument, you know, it is a more ideologically consistent one. The more you look into it, right? It's like, okay, if I'm going to be ideologically consistent, this is a bullet that I have to bite, right? And I'm willing to do it. Like, there's no reason for me not to, right?
Have to pick a box. I'm going to dress my box up however we want. And then other people are like, well, I'm just going to kick down the box entirely. And those are both, in my opinion, valid ways of breaking down the sort of like chokehold that gender has on our way of thinking. And I do think that there's some value in both approaches that are unique. Like, for example, I think that the fuck gender, I'm going to kick down the box and I don't care what you refer to me as.
And I wonder I wonder if one of the issues I might have had with that type of thing, right? Xenogender and neopronouns. Maybe I didn't realize it at the time, but I think part of the issue that I had was I don't want gender to exist. And here are a bunch of people saying that we actually need more gender. And that was the way I viewed it, right? But sometimes less is more, right? So it's like if you have infinitely many genders, that's basically not... that there may as well just not be gender, right?
Liberatory in one particular way, which is like, hey, you can't tell me what I am. I don't care what you say to me. It doesn't affect me. It's like I can literally, like, you know, sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me. And then it makes people very frustrated because they can't put anything on you. But the other perspective, which is like the xenogender side of things, is that xenogender people are able to do this in a slightly different way. Both are equally good, in my opinion. But xenogender people are basically saying, look at what's possible with expression once you start, like, breaking down what you believe to be possible as gender. You can take from whatever you want. Look at how liberating it is. And both can be. You know what I mean? Saying, I don't care what you say about me. I'm going to do whatever. And also saying, this is how I interpret my gender. Those are both, they're both to the same, they're going to the same goal, more or less, which is saying that, like, gender as we know it is fucked up and we shouldn't do it this way. But they're doing it from two different approaches, both of which I think can be valuable. I know that some people find, like, inspirational power from the idea that, like, hey, my gender, that I am, like, constantly having to engage with this thing called gender in my society. But my expression can be unique. And they see other people whose expression is unique and they feel inspired by that to be unique in their own expression. And I know other people who have an approach closer to what you've stated, which is like, I am going to ignore this to the best of my ability.
Yeah, and what I failed to realize at the time is that those approaches are not mutually exclusive. All right?
And sort of just do my own thing regardless of what others say. I think that both of those approaches are complementary. I don't think that they're in opposition, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, that actually does make sense. And I'm glad you mentioned that. I think that also, like, I feel like there's also a big difference between, like, gender and gender expression. Like, you know, obviously so I feel like when it comes to, and that can be very confusing because it's like, okay, you have all of these different things. You have you know, you have, like, obviously you have sex, you have gender, but you also have gender expression, you have masculinity, femininity, and then basically just a bunch of other shit. And it's like, it becomes very convoluted, which I think is probably a good thing at this point, because it's like, okay, it means nothing. Like, the more, so I do think that, well, I think that it means nothing regardless. It only has meaning that society, you know, ascribes to it. But the whole, like, the thing is, right, that the more, you know, abstract things like xenogender or neopronouns just point out the fact that it's meaningless and that the only meaning it has is meaning that is given to it by society arbitrarily based on what society deems to be correct for no other reason than what? Historical precedent? I mean, I make fun of the appeal to the appeal to tradition fallacy all the time. So why would this be different, right? In that sense, it's good. So yeah, I think we actually agree on that.
Yeah.
I know you did a stream reacting to Hunter Avallone.
I did. That. I thought Hunter's takes were hilariously bad.
Yeah, I don't know.
but
I mean,
yeah.
I think that I think he's just like he's not a bad person, like at all. Like I think he's a good person. I do still agree. I think he's a decent person at least, because like obviously he's not in it for money as people accusing him of being a grifter is like a meme. You know, he's not in it for the money, right? So if nothing else, he's at the very least, for the most part, ideologically consistent.
Maybe.
He
I
is
don't know.
actually.
It's hard to know like anything like that. I have a hard time telling like from someone's content whether they're a good or bad person. I think there's a lot of people who make great content who aren't necessarily the greatest of people.
That's true.
I don't really care so much whether he's a good person or a bad person. I mean, I personally, my engagements with Hunter have been very one-sided. I gave him a lot of charitability. I helped him out with a lot of things, and he did the opposite for me. And in fact, jumped on board with dog piles against my partner, who does not deserve any of the dog piles whatsoever. So I don't know. I have personal reasons for thinking that for not liking Hunter. I don't know if he's really a good or bad person, but I think his arguments on gender are terrible. And
I disagree. He makes good arguments. That doesn't mean he's 100% correct, but the arguments he makes, I mean, it moves people to the left. So whether you like it or not, it's good. Like the arguments are good in that they are persuasive. I guess good and persuasive aren't the same, but still, it serves utility.
And also that not only that, but that like he kind of self-reports in a really big way by freaking out for days and days on end on social media about xenogenders, because it's very clear to me that he's trying to like farm for cringe content.
I mean, that's a very interesting way of framing it from DemonMama. Because on one hand, she's saying that she doesn't care about who the person is behind the scenes or what the intent is. But then 5 seconds later, she goes on to explain what she thinks Hunter's intent is. That's I don't know. I mean, that just seems weird to me, for whatever reason. It's like, okay, either you're gonna take the... It's like, okay, either take the consequentialist approach, where you're like, well, it doesn't matter what the intent is, here's the outcome, and versus here's what he's trying to do, right? But you said you don't... whatever. I could just be... I don't know, maybe I'm just being too bad of faith right now.
In his mind, whether he's...
But I don't think he was trying to farm conservative cringe content or whatever. I don't think he was trying to farm anything. Now, that doesn't mean that he was right, but that doesn't mean he was trying to farm content. No, I mean, again, I don't know.
That is hard to tell. I don't really know if he is. But it seems to be what he's going for. He's looking to start fights with people so that he can then talk about it on stream and make a big deal about it.
Yeah, that's an assertion.
And I just don't... I think that's it kind of betrays that, like, it's like a bully mentality. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to pick on these people that that haven't really done anything bad to me, that aren't really doing bad to anyone. I'm going to overstate their harm. Like, I mean, he argues that, like...
Yes, he does overstate their harm. And I will call him out on this in the debate I have with him. You'll see.
Xenogender people are bad for trans people and bad for the trans movement.
That's an awful argument, and I beat Hunter on that point.
Doesn't make any sense. Like that's like that's like the same argument that True Scum people made in the past.
Against non-binary people that just use they them. Yeah, is that that'll make trans people look bad. It's the same thing that Rose... It's basically no different from the arguments that Rose Malay makes against femboys. So, yeah. Same logic, different context. Ooh, is that a donation? Oh, never mind. It's somebody becoming a member. Hey, thank you, Bedlam's son, for becoming a channel member. I hope you enjoy all of the perks. There's so many that I can't even remember what they are. Now, the reason I can't remember what they are is actually because the membership thing is new. But if you're interested in becoming a member, you know, you get exclusive emojis. You get obviously the green name in chat. You get the badge thingy next to your name. So like so it starts out with like one of my oldest, not oldest, but like an old profile picture, and then the profile pictures progressively get more and more recent until it's my current one. If you've been a member for a really long time, you yeah, you get all sorts of cool stuff. You know, you get some exclusive content, you know, etc. Today is my birthday. Why happy birthday, Mr. Historias de Drama y Suspenso. I love you. Aw, I love you too. I kind of like the defined your reality take, though. IMO, it's a bit weird and undefined, and I prefer a they-them format, but I am willing to use whatever. Yeah, that's a similar take to what I have. For safety reasons, I'd still rather go into the women's room in your position. Yeah, that's like the thing. It's like I don't even know which one to use, right? It's like, I don't want to make people uncomfortable, but it's like, okay, am I at risk if I, you know, it's like, well, I probably am, but like, what if there's like, I don't know. I just avoid public restrooms at all costs, basically. I think that has something to do with it. It just breaks down the social construct of gender in a way that freaks people out. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's like, people think that people that use neopronouns are like super easily offended or whatever, but I think it might actually be the opposite. I think that they're the ones trolling everybody else. Unironically, I genuinely believe that now. People that use neopronouns are literally just trolling people, right? Because they know that it's gonna upset people, which is funny. So I feel like, I don't know. You almost have to be a little bit of a troll, in like the good way, right? Like the good kind of trolling. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I'm obviously, that's not going to be all of them, but a lot of people probably, that might be a reason. I categorize Catboys under the umbrella of, oh my god. But yeah. Obviously they're not, and that's not what she's getting at. Dude is the opposite of a grifter, yeah. There it goes, sorry. Was trying to tip on Streamlabs and it wouldn't let me. Ah, I see. Hello, tipster. Welcome to the stream. Welcome, welcome. I'm glad you're here. If Streamlabs isn't letting you donate, Bedlam son, it's probably because you're writing your name with a space. For whatever reason, Streamlabs, with Streamlabs, you can't put a space in your name. I don't know why. That's just how it is. But either way, massive W for you for becoming a channel member. But yeah. For some people, it's probably a component, but identity is such a damn complicated thing, yeah. It's cool, I may as well just give you the membership tip, hell yeah. I definitely take joy in the fact that my existence pisses people off, but wait, hold on, the emoji's in the way. But me trolling people by existing as a trans woman is more of a side effect that I like taking advantage of. Yeah, no, I get that. That's sort of what I do as, like, a femboy. Like, I play into it to troll people, you know, because I know that people have this, like, irrational hatred of me for existing and confusing them sexually and whatnot, right? Because it's like, okay, they're all chasers, but they don't want to admit it to the world or to themselves, right? It's like they're still in the closet and they don't want to come out of the closet, right? So it's like, you know, what can they do? Not much, you know? But, yeah. But yeah, for anyone just tuning in, I'm watching one of my first debates. It was a Neopronouns debate with DemonMama back in January of 2023. So I was really new to debate back then. So yeah. I don't know how many subs I had at the time. It was like less than 200 or barely 200. short hair. Yeah, you can tell that it's a while ago because the hair is different. And I'm using my laptop cam. Exactly, it's part of why I love your content, lol. You and Keffels both scratch that same itch. Hell yeah. Yeah, Keffels is also based. I don't know why people, like, people just hate her for, like, no reason. It's like, and they'll, like, come up with, like, the most petty excuses for why they don't like her. I mean, you do confuse me, but I'm not sure it's, sexually. Like, I find you cute, but not sexual, if that makes sense. No, that makes sense. It's like a platonic, like, oh, that's kind of cute type of thing. I get that. But anyways, yeah, let's continue. Don't want to get too sidetracked, you know? Yeah, I don't buy any of that. Like, oh, these trans people that are, like, more confusing are bad because they make us normal trans people look bad. Like, yeah. Even then I understood, yeah, that's a stupid argument. It's like they think we're all equally degenerate. They just aren't always going to be mask off about it, right? Especially if you're dealing with whatever, the Tim Pools of the world, right? Who you know, pretend to be centrist to appeal to centrism, right? I'm going to go to the bathroom. Well, I'm going to pull a Hassan on myself, on my past self. That is right, everybody. But I you know, is that even pulling a Hassan? I don't know.
Or, like, I've never...
Maybe.
I mean, I used to buy those arguments, but...
I can understand, like,
long
people,
time
like,
ago.
sort of buying them at first glance without putting a whole lot of thought into it, but they fall apart under inspection pretty quickly.
True.
And also, like, I can't help but notice that, like, the people who tend to parrot these arguments tend to have the least actual involvement. Hunter Avallone is a straight white cis guy. Nothing that happens here will ever affect him.
That's
you know
true.
what I mean? Like, he can just say, like, oh, you know, I'm fighting on behalf of trans people without it ever actually affecting him whatsoever.
I don't think that takes away
so
from any of like his points or makes him more or less valid, though. I don't really think...
Oh, no. I'm not
Okay.
saying that it takes away from his
just
points.
making
I'm
sure.
just pointing out that it's a piece of
It's
his...
an explanatory
it's a piece
value
of
or variable.
Well,
yeah.
it has explanatory value
Yeah.
for why you might choose to make a big deal about xenogender people when you could be talking about anything else.
That's true.
And to me, it makes it very apparent that, like, this is something he doesn't see. It's not going to affect him. He doesn't really realize, or he doesn't care that, like, the most clean-cut assimilationist trans person you can imagine, like a trans person who plays by all the rules, is just as fucking hated by conservatives as a xenogender person. You might not be used as easily for cringe content or whatever, but as far as how they're seen, it's exactly the same. Conservatives, like, you should just, if people, for anybody who doesn't believe me on that particular point, just go look at the comment section of Blair White's videos, or watch any of the debate panels that Blair White has ever been involved in with other conservatives. Blair White is like the like...
Okay, so she's kind of right. She's kind of right on this point. But I do think that she does kind of misrepresent Hunter Avallone's position. He is aware of the fact that, yeah, conservatives don't see it as different. Now, I'm guessing that Hunter Avallone's response to DemonMama's argument, if they were in a debate, would be, well, no, that's actually the problem with it. It makes trans people look stupid because they do see it as the same thing, and and then it's like, oh, well, then it's hard to, defend that because that doesn't really fit into what I argue about, right? And you'll notice later that he says something sort of similar to that, when in the debate that he had with me, right? And I call him out on it. I'm like, okay, then just don't talk about xenogender if it's not relevant to the topic. You can just say, oh, you're pivoting because we're not talking about xenogender. We're talking about men, women, and non-binary people. How are xenogender people relevant? It's like, okay, because yeah, I don't know. It's
But yeah.
like ultimate assimilationist. She's like, all other trans people that don't get surgery are not good. They're all freaks and weirdos. She puts down everybody else, and she tries to
I don't even think she's gotten surgery too, which I think is funny as hell.
play it super clean, and they still call her a man all the time.
Which
They
is
still
hilarious,
mistreat her
honestly.
all the time.
It's
Yup.
funny,
it's
but
terrible.
sad.
It
It's
is.
funny and sad because she does it to herself.
But-
I don't even think it's sad. I think it's well deserved, okay? Blair White, and people like Blair White and Calvin Guerra, those types, are one of the main reasons it took me forever to even admit to myself that I'm trans. It's like, oh, well, I don't literally want to chop my dick off 24/7, so I must not be trans, lol. And it's like, oh, and it's like they instilled this fear in me that if I were to transition, it would actually, give me gender dysphoria, right? And it's like, well, if you don't have gender dysphoria as a cis person, then you would have gender dysphoria if you transitioned, right? And they said shit like that, and it's like, well, shit. And it's like, it was like this very dichotomous argument of basically like, oh yeah, it's like gender dysphoria is like this really severe, like, it's like ignoring the fact that there are different amounts and whatnot. So I think that Blair White deserves all of the shit she gets from conservatives. She made her own bed, and she's a terrible person. She's one of the reasons it took me forever to admit to myself that I'm trans, right? So, I think that she deserves all of the horrible shit that conservatives say about her. And maybe even more bad things. I don't know. She's an awful person, though. And she doesn't even believe the shit she's saying, right? Like, she was proven to have lied on about the results of her political compass test, which is fucking hilarious, but also really embarrassing. Like, how stupid do you have to be to, not close the Google Chrome tab where you're searching for images of political compass test results, or, to not even bother, changing the URL that literally, is what determines the results you get. And obviously, anyone who, copies even just like the answers that she put will, get an answer that's different from what she showed on screen, right? So it's like, I think that she deserves all the bad things that happened to her.
But honestly, like,
Oh, absolutely.
What's
Like,
funny,
no
though-
doubt, she made her own bed.
what's funny
Yup.
though is like back in the day when I was like a young teen, like I sadly I used to be a reactionary conservatard. Happens to the
True.
best
A
of
lot of
us.
people are.
But
Yeah.
well, it's funny because like back then it was actually, funnily enough, the shitty like True Scum like Blair White and Calvin Guerra types actually moved me to the left.
Yeah, temporarily. But that was only relative to what I had previously believed. And they instilled beliefs in me that prevented me from moving further left. They gave me a justification to only move slightly left, right? But if I was presented with logical arguments like what I present in my streams, I think I would have been able to move, further left sooner, right? Because it would be, I would realize, oh, well, these arguments are actually, ideologically consistent, right? But there were no streamers like me at the time. There was no one, there wasn't, the Voshes of the world, or the the Xander Halls of the world, the DemonMamas of the world. I think the closest thing there was whatever, Destiny, and I had no idea, because he's been around for ages, but I had no idea who he was, right? So I was like, so all of the political content that I consumed was reactionary conservative shit, right? And and that, that's like, I mean, what do you expect, right? Like the outcome is you're going to be a repressive loser, right? That's what happens. So I don't even think that they moved me left. I think that, like, temporarily you could argue that it may have seemed that way, but I think they prevented me from making progress further than that, right? With an excuse for why I should stay the same, basically, and not become more ideologically consistent, right?
Like, I'm not even joking. So I went from transphobic to true scum, like, completely transphobic to only, like, true scum, kind of, like, anti-non-binary transphobic. And then, like...
Yeah, but, well, the problem with that is that is basically like a, you know... It's basically a misleading a misleading ideology, right? That prevents you from getting to an actually good, consistent, and morally good and justifiable ideology, right? It's sort of like a barrier to that. Whereas, you know, going from, you know, transphobe to what I believe now is probably easier than going from true scum to what I believe now. I unironically believe that, by the way. Actually, I don't know. I guess it depends. In terms of how I perceive others, maybe not, but in terms of how I perceive myself, absolutely. It's like these, you know, the whole, you know, anti-non-binary thing, you know, the whole, oh, you'll get gender dysphoria if you transition and don't already have gender dysphoria. That type of shit stuck with me, even after I had stopped believing in it in an ideological sense. Like those ideas and fears were ingrained in me, right? So that's why, you know, that's why yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just, like, kind of stopped caring about, like, politics in general for a while. And actually, like, so for a while, I guess, I guess over time I've slowly moved more and more left-leaning, which I think is a good thing. But,
Based.
yeah, so it's actually Hunter Avallone that got me into politics, because I found his
That is
shit,
true.
like, whatever, a few months ago. I was actually more right-leaning than he was by a little bit at the time.
Sure.
He moved...
Yeah, and by that I mean I wasn't sure about a few positions, right? You know, because obviously neutral is going to be more right-leaning relative to leftism, right? Because that's more of a centrist thing, right? Neutrality is inherently centrist, most of the time. No, now, obviously, it's going to be relative to what other people believe. I mean, that's, you know, centrist is a very relativistic position, but still, you get the point.
Moved me left, and now I'm more left than he is.
That's also true. It's a nice byproduct of being ideologically consistent and actually thinking about my positions, is becoming more left-leaning.
Because I've, you know, paid more attention to politics. But I think that he has done a lot of good, and
I'd say, yeah, his presence on YouTube serves utility. It does a lot more good than bad.
I think
I don't think you can even argue with that.
that should be acknowledged. Like,
Oh, is that a donation? Oh, never mind. It is a member. That's also very good. You made my thighs appear on screen. Thank you, Gilded Fox, for becoming a channel member. You absolute legend. Tipster says, I noticed that if you're a straight cis man who hangs out with trans women, everyone assumes you are just a chaser. It's cringe. True! It's like heaven forbid you hang out with somebody because you like them as a person, right? You know, it's like, does everything have to be sexual? It's like, if they're the ones that see it as exclusively sexual, I think that's more of a reflection on them than it is on whoever they're trying to criticize. You know, as a wise man once said, every conservative accusation is really just a confession, right? Like, that's really what it boils down to. But yeah. You are adorable. You're just also clearly too young for me, lol. I mean, that's fair enough. And thank you. It is a stupid argument. I don't know what argument you're referring to, but I assume it was an argument I called stupid. I don't know. I'm not sure if that's a stupid argument. Language defines thought, thought defines culture, and so on. So working on language problems like this, at least. Okay. Alright, hold on. Welcome to the patriarchy, true. Yeah, to stay neutral is always to side with the oppressor of the aggressor. A lot of people are just ignorant to realize oppression is going outside of their limited circle. I don't know if I entirely agree with that. Like, if you just don't care about politics and you don't, and that's not your thing, and you're just like, I don't know, lol, I don't know anything about it, and you admit that you don't know anything about it, and you're too lazy to learn, you know, it's better if you become a staunch leftist like me, right? But, you know, if people aren't aware that, you know, there are oppressors and, you know, the oppressees, whatever you want to call it, whatchamacallit, it's like, okay, that from their perspective, they're not doing anything wrong, right? And to be fair, I would argue that their presence in the political landscape would be neutral. I don't think that they would be beneficial or harmful, since the outcome of their presence is exactly the same as if they had no presence, because functionally speaking, they have no presence because they're not invested in politics. That being said, you know, I would rather they become leftists, but I'm not going to, you know, be super harsh towards centrists, because I used to be centrist at one point, you know, I was, whatever, conservative, then I stopped caring, then I was apolitical, then I was centrist, then I became a leftist, right? You know, but it's like, if you would tried convincing me to become a leftist with that argument, I would have probably become a right-winger out of spite. You know, it's like, because I would have been like, oh, okay, you just have a victim complex, right? Even though I'm wrong, it's like, oh, okay, you just want me to feel bad for you because you're oppressed. Okay, yeah, whatever. It's like, why should I be forced to give a shit about your issues type of thing? Even though it's selfish, that is what a lot of people think, right? I wouldn't use that argument on a centrist. Okay, good, because that's going to move them in the that's going to repel them. But yeah. Did the Germans who did nothing about their neighbors getting shipped off to camps side with the oppressor by staying out of it? I would argue no, because they didn't really have a choice, right? Like, what, like, keep in mind that even though it would be better if they did something about it, it's like, what can they do about it? Like, those people felt powerless. You know, even if they're ideologically in line with us, what can they do that won't get them killed, that will serve utility? The Nazis only had a 33% approval at best. Yeah. But again, if everybody is living in fear, because that's how fascists, you know, rise to power, is through fear. They need fear in order to, you know, oppress people, right? Because fascism is not a popular ideology. But what is popular among people in general is responding to fear with more, you know, whatever, with ideas that are more irrational. That's a very that's a common thing, and that's what fascists take advantage of, is fear, right? If nobody was afraid, then, you know, Nazi Germany wouldn't have existed the way it did, right? It'd been like, oh, okay, the other 77% of people who don't agree with them, you know, come together and act against it, right? But they didn't do that because they were all afraid, right? It was a collective mentality about fear. But yeah, you just... Alright, at this point, I don't give a shit about centrists. If an insurrection, anti-trans bills, and Nazis won't make them become leftists, nothing will. That's not true, right? Because keep in mind that we see these things happening, right? But they don't, because they just avoid politics, because they're still of the immature mindset of politics equals bad, right? And that both sides have their problems type of thing, right? And they can't distinguish categorically between untrue things that are said against the left and true things that are said about the right. They see all of it as maybe it might be true, it probably is, maybe, I don't know, lol, xd, right? It's part of why conservatives won't always say what they believe directly. Now, they've gone mask off recently,
But, you know, for instance, you know, a lot of the time, they still don't go mask off, right? And that's, like, you have people like Tim Pool that appeal to centrism, quote unquote, right? But he's not actually a centrist, right? So it's like, again, it's because people don't even know what other people's positions are, right? And conservatives do this deliberately, where they make it hard to know what political positions even denote, right? That's why they lie. Because if they didn't lie, then yes, everyone would become a leftist. But they lie. So it muddies the waters quite a bit. And because it muddies the waters, it's like, oh, well, this is confusing as shit. I don't want anything to do with this. And that's understandable. So the best thing you can do, if you want them to become more political and become leftists, is introducing them to politics through the lens of something apolitical, right? Find a way to instill ideas in them, or, you know, make them, let them, you know, discuss philosophical ideas with them. Have them establish a philosophical framework, right? Because at the end of the day, you're just, you know, being like, okay, here's the equation. But when it comes to politics, right? If you already have that framework established, it's a lot easier to just, you know, plug in the numbers and see if it works, right? That's sort of what it's like. Yeah. Anyways, I feel like it's a moot point. I'm just glad Gen Z are passionate with more passionate with politics than millennials. Yeah, I mean, that doesn't say much, but yeah. But yeah, anyways, let's continue this. All right, we gotta finish this up.
I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to imagine that he's done some good by like deflating some of these arguments. And I mean, hell, I mean, I coached him on his for like a lot on his argument with Lauren Southern, and I think he did well in that argument.
Yeah,
I just think
he's
that
good
like
yeah.
I think Vosh coached him in that as well.
He's good at debate.
Yeah, I don't think he's bad at it. I think he's able to do pretty well in debate. He's able to keep his head cool. I just don't understand. Why you would like dip into random I just don't understand his obsession with xenogenders, and I don't understand.
Yeah, well, in all fairness, he hasn't really talked about it at all for a while. After this stream, roughly, I think he stopped talking about it and didn't talk about it since with the exception of when people bring it up. Then he might talk about it. But even then, he seems kind of reluctant. Like, it seems like it's not something he enjoys talking about, really. So, I don't know. I think he probably isn't gonna bring it up on his own at this point. At least that's the impression I've gotten.
Understand some of his other decisions, and
yeah.
I don't really like in my engagements with him, I'm not here to produce like a final conclusion on the state of Hunter Avallone. If he gives a take that I really disagree with, I'm going to disagree with it. And if I see him engaging in behavior that I think is really shitty, like for example, blowing up on random people that he thinks are bad for really, really stupid reasons, like xenogender people that he blows up on his Twitter account and then they get flooded with a bunch of fucking assholes. Like, I just think that that's wasteful and stupid.
Yeah, well, I think that, he might have been irresponsible with his platform a little bit at times. I think a lot of content creators are, though, right? It's like, look, here's the thing about being a content creator, right? You're never gonna believe this, but, like, we're human beings as well, right? Like, we see ourselves as people. So even though, from your perspective, we have these massive audiences, and it's like, oh, well, it's obvious you have a lot of influence. I don't feel much different from how I felt before I had 100 subscribers on this channel, right? I have over 1,000 now, right? And way back in the day, you know, years ago, if you asked me, you know, is 1,000 subs a lot? I'd be like, oh yeah, that's like basically famous. I wouldn't call it famous. It's like, but it's like, yeah, I'd kill for 1,000 subs. That's like the start of becoming a big YouTuber. But now in my eyes, it's like, oh, actually no, 10,000 is the start of becoming a big YouTuber. But when I hit 10,000 subs, it'll be 100,000. Oh, that's when I become, that's when I'm on the rise, But it's like the goalpost there is always going to shift upwards, right? It's like so that you see yourself as normal, quote unquote, right? So, if you're responding to somebody on Twitter, sometimes you might not be thinking, oh, I have a large audience, which means there might be a different standard in terms of of my conduct at times because consequentially the outcomes of my actions when I do this will be different due to the fact that I have an audience, right? Whereas if it's if I'm just somebody with 3 followers, then it doesn't matter, and it's like, I don't know, it's interesting. It's interesting. I think that's that's not even a Hunter Avallone problem. That's like a content creators in general, I don't even know if I'd consider it that like a problem or just like a byproduct but like, I don't know.
Yeah,
I agree.
It's wasteful and stupid. So like, yeah, maybe I'm sure he's done some good things. Like there's a lot of people I think have probably done good. There were people I really don't like who I think have done good.
Yeah.
But we are not.
She's probably thinking of Destiny. Because, I mean, let's be real. Destiny has, gotten a lot of people to, shift leftwards, right? I don't really think Destiny has gotten very many people to go closer to the right.
We are not.
I mean, shit, I remember, not even that long ago, a commentary YouTuber named Lyrix, who used to be very blatantly transphobic, was, like, refusing to misgender Jalen. When, in a stream that he came back in, and and in one of his videos, he said that he watches Destiny streams. So it's like he went from very transphobic to, I don't know if I'd consider him trans ally, but at least kind of indifferent, right? At least centrist. So it's like he has done a lot of good, right? That doesn't mean Destiny is like the best person in the world or whatever. But I do think that she probably was thinking of Destiny as, like, the example, as, like, the person in her mind of somebody she really doesn't like that's done a lot of good.
Defined only by our past actions.
That's true.
Some people get worse with time, and also some people can be corrected from getting worse if you challenge them. Not that I think that Hunter is ever going to listen to me.
He's
Hunter
not, well, I
blocked
think
me over some really stupid shit.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's interesting. Because it seemed like Hunter was, listening to me when I talked about it. I think Hunter, I think Hunter can change. I've watched quite a bit of his content. And notice how, yeah, and I was right about that. He hasn't, gone out and made fun of xenogender people, right? So, it's like, oh, okay, yeah. It's like he's not talking about it. He is, changing, right? Doesn't mean he's perfect, but, and it's not, I mean, he's doing, okay, I see conservatism as like a mental illness, right? Based. I mean, that is true. It truly is. And,
Okay.
Hunter has gone through rehabilitation, but also true. Progress isn't always going to be linear. He's also still going to have a shit take every now and again. He's still going to be reactionary every once in a while, but I see it as more of a lapse rather than a relapse. And I think that this level of charitability that I'm offering is it's very useful. Especially, with something like this, right? Where we're talking about, oh, he did something reactionary. Well, that doesn't mean that he is a reactionary again. It just means, oh, he kind of fucked up one time, right? That doesn't denote his entire character. I see it as something that's like, yeah, this is bad, but, like, he's made so much progress, and it's like, I feel like... I mean, yeah. These are probably some of the better arguments that I made, right? During the debate with DemonMama, right? Is the ones, defending Hunter Avallone, frankly. Like, I feel like as long as, like, people are, like, understanding, but, like, also willing to, like, hold him accountable, I think... Like, how can, like, yeah, you can't really argue against what I'm saying here, right? Because, I mean, yeah, it's like, yeah, it's, what are you gonna be like? No, you shouldn't be understanding or hold him accountable,
or like that doesn't like none of that makes any sense. It's like, yeah, I'm saying that holding people accountable is important, and that being understanding is important as well, right? It's like, who's gonna argue against that? No, don't be understanding. Don't understand anybody, okay? That's bad. Don't do it.
I think that is the best position to take, is to like understand where he's coming from, but also like hold him under scrutiny, give him good arguments for the whole because even
and this is a utilitarian argument, by the way. I didn't realize it at the time, but yes, it literally that what I was arguing for does serve the most utility, and that was where it was coming from. It was a place of both. It was, you know, coming from mainly a place of consequentialism. Like, okay, well, obviously, you know, discrediting an entire individual or saying that they are a reactionary because of one reactionary thing that they did is not going to serve any utility, right?
Even when it came to, like, when he was, like, he started out, like, arguing, or, like, when he was talking about it, like, not debating anyone, it seemed kind of bad faith, but, as soon as he was, like, actually debating people, like, he switched to, like, being good faith and like actually considering what they had to say, and he was like genuinely like reconsidering his position. So like
I mean, we'll see. I saw. I mean, I reacted to the video that he posted. He posted clips of his video, and then this is his video he made a couple of months ago. He was posting this all over repeatedly on social media. So I reacted to that video. I don't really care to sit through a bunch of his debates.
That's
partially because
fair.
like I try to give people the like an equal amount of, well, I am generally very generous with charitability, as people will know. Even
anyways, we'll probably watch the rest of this debate specifically later because it's more of like not as many ideas were being challenged after that point. It was mainly just us agreeing on most things and disagreeing on others. But yeah. Hold on. I recommend Ghosts of the Osterfront from Better what? You were pretty... Oh, wait. My bad. Y'all are talking to each other as well. I don't... Okay, what are people talking about at this point? Fellow Canadian. Imagine being Canadian. Canadians aren't even real people, I'll bet. So, yeah, that's right. Alright, anyways, sorry. I'm reading chat, but it's like, oh, y'all are talking to each other, which is cool. But then it's like, oh, Canadians are real, you're fake, Femyoz? Nah, Canadians are fake. Imagine being Canadian, haha. L bozo, L plus ratio. Imagine. I think, alright, we're gonna watch, alright. Anyways, we're gonna watch, the debate, so, oh my god, I'm very good at speaking today. So, about a month ago, I had a Neopronouns debate with Hunter Avallone, who has, basically, you know, sort of the opposite position of DemonMama. So, you know, this was a little over a month ago, I think. I debated Hunter Avallone. I could have done better, but I think I did okay, at least. Yeah, so that's what we're going to be watching next. Yeah. How are you?
Hello, greetings.
So greetings and salutations. I have my camera on, by the way.
Let me turn your video. Oops.
So
actually, no,
anyways,
let me show your video on screen
yeah.
if that's okay.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So,
go
anyways, okay, so, I want to establish my position first, okay? So, here's my thing. I haven't heard arguments on either side that are good. However, I believe that everything is justified until there is a logical reason for it not to be, right? Meaning that there has to be some sort of objective or measurable harm.
So, right off the bat, I'm doing a way better job, right? Obviously, I'm more experienced in debate by that point, right? But right off the bat, I'm establishing a clear and concise moral framework. Also, you can see my video on his screen. It was very pixelated, because, yeah, Discord be like, bruh, but, yeah. Oh, wait, yeah, here we go. So what is the objective or measurable harm caused by xenogender and neopronouns?
I don't know if it needs to have an objective harm to be illogical, does it?
I think, so I'm starting off very strong, by the way, because it's like, okay, so either he has to, you know, so he sort of has to disagree with my standard to have an argument, and in which case it's like, okay, well, what is his standard, right?
What?
Whether or not something is illogical does not dictate whether it is justified.
Well, what do you think? So wait. What do you think my argument is?
I don't like that he asks me what I think his argument is. It's like, you know what your argument is. Why don't you articulate it, right? Why should I have to articulate your argument for you? I don't know. Seems like a weird debate tactic. I don't know if I'd consider it bad faith or not, but it's one that I don't personally like.
For xenogenders.
Well, yeah. I mean, we might not entirely disagree, but from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong here, you seemed to be against it. I don't know how much your position has changed, but
I can explain it to you really basically, which is that
yeah.
in order for the view.
So yeah, so I handled that pretty well. Basically, just being as vague as possible, right? I'm not like. Again, I'm not there, I wasn't there to make his arguments for him, so I'm like, oh, pretty sure your position, correct me if I'm wrong here, is that you're against it, which, is why we were debating in the first place, right? So I think I handled that well.
My view of gender to be consistent, gender needs to refer to something, and this is like the first level of the argument that starts to break down with xenogender. So like, when I hear gender, I'm thinking of a spectrum of masculinity and femininity, which we have socially constructed. So we collectively as a society have a general understanding of what masculinity or femininity, or I guess like in the middle would be, right?
But why should that be obligatory?
We can kind of dictate that. And so because of the social construct, it then influences an internal perception one has of themselves in regards to that external construct.
That part is true.
So if you're saying, I identify as a frog, there is no frog on a masculinity-femininity spectrum. Maybe you have a different identity. That's fine.
Sure, but why, maybe if I wasn't on the spot, I probably would have asked him. But why is that spectrum obligatory?
Fine, but it's not a gender identity. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. But what I will say is when people say that they identify as, like, a frog, let's say, they're not being literal. They're usually, it's usually, like, a metaphor for how they, feel about themselves and how they... I think this point is irrelevant, given the framework I had set up. There's no payoff. I should have just asked, why is the the spectrum of masculinity and femininity obligatory in his worldview? I think that would have been better. How they see themselves internally.
So that the harm lies in the fact that these people are seeing themselves a certain way, using weird labels that no one really is understanding, and then calling you transphobic if you don't engage with what is, let's be real, illogical at the moment.
So I don't want to label you, I'm not going to label you as transphobic. You're not transphobic, obviously. But I have to ask you, is the harm being caused because you think it's weird? Is that a harm?
No, I said the harm lies in the fact that if I don't respect this view of gender, which we seem to be on the same page that it's illogical.
I don't know why he assumes that I think it's illogical. I hadn't even stated my position. Now, he happened to be kind of correct. I don't think it's necessarily logical. But I don't think whether or not it's logical is relevant. So I don't know why he would bring that up.
Then I am deemed transphobic. Not by you necessarily, but I've been called transphobic a bunch.
And I'm pretty sure right away, I point out the fact, I'm pretty sure I ended up pointing out the fact that, that's not a harm that's inherent to, people identifying that way in of itself. So that's just an argument against people calling you transphobic. So, again,
because of my take on this.
I don't think you're transphobic, obviously. But that doesn't mean that people calling you transphobic necessitates your position being more correct because they're wrong in calling you transphobic.
No, I'm not.
I mean, yeah. I could have articulated it better, but I had the right idea. Keep in mind, I was also pretty nervous in that debate.
I'm saying mine is correct
think,
or theirs are wrong. I'm saying that's the harm. You asked me at first if there's like a harm. I think it's harmful to call people who are otherwise transphobic because they don't agree with your illogical view of gender.
But what do you mean by, like, so when you say that that's the harm, you're describing a harm from certain people's reactions to your opinion on xenogender and neopronouns, but what is the harm being caused by xenogender itself and neopronouns itself?
Well, like I said, I don't know if...
Slam dunk argument right there. Couldn't have worded it better. That was an absolute W. That was a huge W for me. That specific point was strong.
There needs to necessarily be a harm, because I never said that, like, this is an objective moral wrong, or I wouldn't say objective, but I never said this was a moral wrong. So I don't think that it causes...
So I see, because I ended up getting him to concede, a moral position against it. So he admits that there's nothing immoral about it. So there is no, real justifiable reason to be against it specifically. If you don't have a moral opposition to it, then what is your opposition to just being respectful to people, right? Even if it doesn't make sense. It's like, okay, what utility does it serve to not be respectful, right? So yeah, slam dunk argument from me, because I got him to concede.
Necessarily even
a little
needs
bit.
To cause harm. But I think the harm that is caused is more or less an optics harm, yes. Where if you are already fighting for a marginalized group to get rights, and right now Republicans are basically running on cutting out trans healthcare.
This is an awful argument, by the way. This is very weak from Hunter. He rarely makes arguments this bad.
We don't need to be worrying about a bunch of people calling otherwise trans allies transphobic because they don't respect their gender identity is like cat gender.
See, but the reason his argument comes across as weak is because that's how strong my statement / that's how strong what I said was, right? Because it sort of forced him to, take it in this direction, right? So, yeah.
Like, you have to understand that that's, sure, maybe it's not a harm in the sense that it's not a moral harm, but it harms the conversation, and it makes things more difficult, especially for people like me who try and pride myself on giving good arguments.
Well, you just made a terrible argument, my guy. That was not a good argument. It harms the conversation. That doesn't make any sense. I feel like you don't even have to know anything about the subject material or about debate to know that you don't have to include xenogender or neopronouns in the discussion. You can just not talk about it. And if somebody brings it up, it's probably because they're pivoting and don't want to talk about what you're actually talking about in a discussion, right? You just call them out for pivoting. It's easy, right? Because that's what they would be doing.
It does do harm for I guess from my perspective personally too.
So this is a very similar argument to what a lot of gay people used to say about trans people in the past, where and notice how I almost sort of got him to stumble a little bit, right? He's saying, "Oh, yeah, there's not a moral harm, but actually there is a harm, but it's like an optics harm, but there doesn't have to be a harm, but I think that there might be, when it comes to optics." That's what happens when you make a strong argument against someone or their position, right? They used to say, "Oh, yeah, we're not like those weirdos. We're normal. We're just gay. We're not like delusional. We're not trying to like chop off our penises," right? It's a similar argument to that.
Now, I will acknowledge that you don't have to focus on it as an issue. I'm not saying you need to be the biggest xenogender advocate or anything, but if, let's say, somebody were to ask you for your opinion on it, I think that a better response wouldn't be to be like, oh yeah, that's stupid and bad and you shouldn't do that. A better response would be, I don't really care about xenogender, it doesn't really affect me and isn't relevant to the conversation, and then, because ultimately if a conservative brings that up,
You're right.
it's
That's
not
gonna be a red
necessarily
herring.
that it's an yeah, it's not an optics elf. Yeah, and Hunter agrees. For you, it's literally just them trying to pivot.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And I get that. And I don't think this is the same argument, though, as gay people saying, like, we're not like those weirdos or whatever, because from the perspective I'm coming from, I feel as though my view of gender is incredibly consistent internally and externally.
Then you don't have to, like, if xenogender isn't a part of your view, then just don't talk about it or think about it, or like, it's not that difficult, right? My view of gender is also consistent, even though it's different, internally and externally, right? Maybe it's not consistent with what most of society believes, but logically, it's very consistent.
It makes sense as to why there are people who have gender identities that relate to an external construct of gender. This makes sense to me. But again, it has to refer to something.
And this is a fallacious argument from him. It's about what makes sense to him. But again, whether or not he understands something does not determine whether or not it is wrong. So, this is a really bad argument on his end. And then he's going on and asserting that it has to mean something. Well, what it means is that all that it means, all that gender means, is that you're defining people or categorizing them based on arbitrary standards that society has made, right? So the only difference, the only reason that it's categorically different from xenogenders is society accepts, the two main genders, I guess you could say. That's the only difference. But again, what the validity of something, logically speaking, is not determined by whether or not a plurality of people are on board with it. That's what he fails to understand here, and it shows.
So, me saying that it's illogical, do we agree on that? I feel like you agree with me, at least partially.
Partially, yeah. I don't think that it, like, to me, it doesn't necessarily make sense to me either. I just find it hard to, be against something that doesn't directly cause harm to me, if that makes sense. Or to anybody for that matter. I should have said to anybody. Don't see why I need to sort of take an approach that is actively
You don't need to be against it. I
it.
don't think I would be far more,
Okay.
Obviously I'd be far more like, yo, be against transphobia. I'm not going to say like, you need to
Yeah.
be against xenogenders. But like,
And I think that I think I framed it in a smart way still, right? Because it's like, obviously, you don't have to be against it. I think it puts it into perspective.
it still comes up and it's still part of the discourse, whether we like it or not. And
If it comes up, it's because your opponent, if they're a conservative, is pivoting. All you have to do is say, you're pivoting. Stop going off topic and actually talk to me about what you came here to talk about, alright? We're talking about binary trans people and maybe non-binary broadly if we get there. It has nothing to do with xenogender. I don't care about xenogender. They're not even a part of my worldview. So I'm indifferent to them. It doesn't make any sense to me, so let's move on, right? That's all he has to say, right?
and it's going to come up as a conversation. And also, let's be fair, I haven't even talked about xenogenders now in months.
That is also true. So
So
no,
it's not like
that's
every
why
stream
I
is, like,
said for all we know, we
dedicated
could.
the
Yeah.
crazy, like,
No, I know.
trans people. Like, I'm not like going that route, obviously. And I honestly, even if I met somebody who
agree.
had a fucking xenogender, I'd probably do my best to just be respectful and move on.
And that's all I really needed. And at that point, it became, I don't know, I became less It became less of a debate for me at that point. Because that was really what I was looking for him to say. Is to acknowledge that, yeah, you know, when it comes to how I'm gonna interact with people, you know, practically speaking, I'm gonna be respectful. That's all I really wanted out of this discussion. So, just keep that in mind. I've already won. Whether he realizes it or not. Because that was really all I needed. That doesn't mean he lost either. I think he won because, you know, he came out with a mostly correct position, I guess. Which is that, you know, it's good to be respectful to people, even if you don't understand them. And again, that was really what I was looking for. But notice how before he was, you know, talking about, oh, well, it's going to harm discourse, and, you know, it's you know, trying to explain that it's bad. But at this point, he's kind of conceded that by admitting, oh, actually, no, I'd be respectful to them in person, right? And that's basically what I was looking for, right? So, obviously, I'm way more rhetorically effective by this point, right? Way more experience than I did in the debate I had with DemonMama.
But like,
me too.
Yeah, but like,
Okay.
if I'm going to talk about my
It's fair.
position on here, then I don't think it makes me transphobic to say that it's illogical, because in my mind, it's the same way
Now he's arguing against a point I never made.
as somebody saying, like, I really like racing cars. That's all I just really like racing cars. So now I have a new religion. It's called car religion. Like, no, because in order for something to be a religion, it must correspond to views of spirituality or...
Well, actually, anything could technically become a religion. If you think that you have a spiritual connection to your car, that could be your religion. Well, genuinely. I mean, it's about as rational as, you know, Christianity or Islam or Judaism. It's all just a bunch of made-up shit.
or why we exist, you know, these kinds of things. You can't just decide one day that something's a religion if it doesn't meet the criteria.
What are the criteria? I think I should have asked him what the criteria for religion are. But I don't think I did. I think I just sort of... Because, I mean, to be fair, that would have been... He is kind of pivoting, so...
I feel the same can go for gender.
To be fair, religion is pretty illogical anyways. I mean, unless you believe in the flying spaghetti monster. The flying spaghetti monster is where it's at. True. Honestly, so based. What a genius. Who is that cute little femboy on screen? That femboy genius, okay? They seem like they're very smart. I would subscribe to them with notifications on. You know? You know? I'm just saying. Okay. But
True.
that's a whole side tangent. I mean, we all know that. Yeah, and again, this is another example of me effectively using humor to sort of lighten the mood a little bit. You know, get rid of any tension, right? Make me more relatable, more likable, etc. It's very effective, and I think it's underutilized in a lot of debates where it could be utilized, right? It gets the other person to be slightly more open to, you know, coming away from the debate, you know, whether they acknowledge it publicly or not, you know, at least thinking about your position and what you were arguing, right? That the flying spaghetti monster is the ultimate arbiter of truth, but true. Anyways, either way, I think that, where was I going with this? Sorry, I have bad attention span.
No, it's okay. We're talking about
anyways,
the religion.
Yeah, I think we actually don't even disagree as much as I thought we would on the xenogender thing. I think that I do remember, and I'm obviously it's not something you constantly talk about. Nor do I think it would be right to call you transphobic, since you're one of the main people at the forefront, literally advocating for our rights. See how I give him this charitability? That's why he was willing to listen to me in the first place, right? If I had just been like, yeah, you're transphobic because you say things that are transphobic. It's like, even if he was transphobic, which I don't think he is, even then I don't think I would, you know, talk about how you tell him, oh, you're a transphobic piece of shit, fuck you. Like, that doesn't get me anywhere, right? Because it's like, you know, obviously he doesn't think he's transphobic. I don't think he's transphobic either. But even if I did, it wouldn't benefit anybody to say that he is, because at the end of the day, also, I think I'm wearing a similar outfit
when I debate. That's funny. I'm matching outfits like right now, and when I debated Hunter, or it's the same top and arm thingies. Good comp, or maybe it's a similar top. I don't know. Yeah. Hell yeah. Besties. I'm besties with myself. We match.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
No. I do remember. You were a little bit reactionary with. Oh yeah, and then technical difficulties. I think he accidentally left or something. I don't remember.
Oops.
Yep. All right, I'll skip ahead.
Whatever you.
Yeah. I do, however, remember you being a little bit reactionary at one point. With the xenogender thing. I think it was like a month or two ago, maybe, and then you debated bunk. And then they kind of shifted your position a little bit, but I couldn't really tell.
They made me understand that it was more metaphorical, but the metaphorical part, although makes more sense, still seems pretty illogical to me because
I think that the best argument in favor of it is acknowledging, yeah, it's absurd, and that's like kind of the point, right?
Now you're metaphorically trying to explain your gender in regards to, is it still any form of masculinity or femininity?
I mean, I think in a lot of instances, it's not trying to explain gender. It's trying to explain why gender as a concept is illogical and doesn't make any sense. And how, the way we categorize people is completely arbitrary and, frankly, doesn't really serve any utility, but whatever. I think either way, my goal was not to make it make sense to him. That obviously, my goal was to, I already accomplished it, right?
Like that's where it would keep getting lost for me. But sorry, where was I being reactionary?
I do remember, and I think DemonMama also talked about this. You were, I think you were like, quote retweeting somebody. But yeah, the fact of the matter is, I got what I wanted out of that discussion. So yeah. But yeah, notice how I can do this and this, right? It's in the top left corner, bottom right corner, top left corner, bottom right corner. Yeah, I added a new thing. Hell yeah. Anyways, I'm sorry. So it's for when somebody's on the other side of the screen. But yeah. Damn, you young Femyoz do better retroactively. Wait, what? He admitted that gender is a social construct and that it's a matter of personal comfort. Also, why did you say that makes sense? Push back? I think part of it was also part of it is if I'm on the spot, right? Then it's like, obviously, I'm obviously gonna have to, and part of it is being agreeable, and part of it is I'm not interested in arguing against certain points. Again, the goal was to, get him to say, yeah, I'll be respectful in a practical application to those people. That's all I was really looking for. I wasn't trying to own him or shit on him in the debate or anything. I'm very confused why this has to be in chat and not DMs. Wait, what? I live by reason, even cheap ones, so long as they exist. Okay. See, reason didn't have to be rude about it, though. Bitch, please, I'm sure. Okay, you guys are just arguing with each other. I guess there's a difference between a religion someone believes in and a religion that is recognized by the world in some shape or form that shows a proper belief system and social system. Yeah, but I mean, how much of a proper belief system would you say Christianity is? It's like, oh, it's a bunch of illogical shit, right? At the end of the day, if it's none of it is logical, right? That's the thing, right? Loving cars religion is probably either just a joke religion or more so a public well, yeah, obviously. I was talking more in theory, right?
if we're being theoretical here, like, technically car religion could be a religion if someone were to be like, well, you see, I am spiritually connected to the car, right? And at that point, it would be like, okay, there's an actual, like, sort of, you get what I mean? Like, obviously it's illogical, but I wouldn't say that religion in general is logical, right? So, I would actually bite the bullet there and say all of it is illogical, and that none of it makes sense, and that there's not really any criteria for what does or doesn't classify as a religion, right? So long as you telling me NASCAR doesn't help people form worldviews and social structures, damn it. Yeah, that too. Christianity is just the white version of Judaism. I don't know. I think it's all a bunch of dumb shit. But yeah, I don't know. None of that kind of stuff is logical. At all. Right? It's all just a bunch of shit. It's all meaningless. I'm not a nihilist, right? I'm an existentialist. But I believe that religion is meaningless to an extent. It's not entirely meaningless. It has meaning that is ascribed to it, right? It's people give it meaning. Its practitioners are what define its meaning. But it doesn't have intrinsic meaning or value, right? At least not as far as I'm concerned. Now, I can't prove that it doesn't, which is why I usually take an agnostic approach, right? I don't think that there's a justifiable reason to come to the conclusion that, a god that has oh so conveniently been depicted by humans accurately, would exist, let alone a specific one. It's like, okay, if let's say that's the case, it's like, okay, well, which one of the thousands of religions is the correct one? I'd wager probably none of them, right? Except for the flying, like, okay, to be fair though, flying spaghetti monsters based. Don't do Judaism dirty like that. They evolved from being a weird, fucked up cult in the desert to being the ultimate debate bro religion a long time ago. I don't even know. I'm the correct religion? No, I am. I'm the correct religion. I don't know, I'm devolved to chaos, so I'm more of a happy... Okay. Oh, you guys are talking to each other. Christianity is the British version. IDKY, I said white. Well, I don't know. It doesn't matter. Either way, it doesn't determine whether or not it's logical. It's all just a bunch of horse shit that contradicts itself. I don't know. I mean, if that's what you want to believe, go for it. Believing something like that in of itself is not intrinsically harmful, but, you can believe whatever you want. Just don't use it as, like, a justification to be hateful or whatever, right? Like, that's usually what I tell religious people. It's like, you can believe what you want, just don't use it as an argument against my existence, or I will shit on what you believe in, right? Because that would be the root of the issue in that case. Femyoz has a point. You better believe I do. I always have a point, don't I? Hee. I may not believe in religion, but I've probably read more books in multiple world religions than the average religious person. That wouldn't surprise me. I probably also know more about Christianity than the average Christian. A lot more, actually. That's why I beat Christian presuppositionalists, like, and fundamentalists in debates every time, right? Because I know more than they do about their own religion. Like, there are things that have been proved, but it also has caused shit. Yeah. British people. Imagine. Like how people think the Bible proved, quote unquote, that dinosaurs didn't exist. They did. They just called them giants, beasts, stuff like that. Yeah, I don't know. Well, I mean, the Bible's just a bunch of shit. It's like, you have to, like, stretch your imagination quite a bit to come to the conclusion that it's logically coherent and that it's consistent with both, scientific reality and philosophically consistent, even internally. Like, come on, it's not. Sai, I hate giving Femyoz an easy point, but they're being based as fuck here. Why, thank you, and I agree. I'm always based as fuck, though, to be fair. Let's be real. We came up with the term dinosaur, not people thousands of years ago. I suppose. Like, but either way, regardless, you know, if nothing else, and this is more of like a jokey meme, I'm just shitting on you for fun type of argument that I might make. If nothing else, you know, it's like, I find it hard to believe that there was genuinely a talking snake and a man who walked on water, right? I just don't buy it for a second. I used to. I don't anymore. I forgot to say this, but you are looking very cute tonight. Why, thank you. God of hyperspace. I really appreciate that. But yeah. Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed this stream. If you did, make sure to let me know by smashing like and subscribing. You can also become a member, or you could donate with the Streamlabs link in the description below. It's up to you. Or you could do nothing. I mean, it's not obligatory to do something, though I would say it's my personal preference. But yeah. Now, in terms of the conclusion, right, I forgot to do this portion of it. In conclusion, what can we conclude from the 2 debates I did? Well, one, I got better at debate, obviously, but aside from that, I'd say I don't agree with either of them, at least not entirely. I believe that it's important to be respectful to people, but that doesn't mean that it makes sense to me, right? Or that I think it's logically coherent or sound, right? Ultimately, whether or not it's logical isn't you know, that doesn't denote whether or not it serves utility, though. And I think that ultimately, you know, I think the conclusion that you can come away with is, it probably doesn't make sense to you. Or it doesn't make sense to me either, really. But what does make sense is obviously just, you know, being a good person, right? Just don't be an asshole to people, right? For no reason. Be an asshole to people if they give you a reason, but if they're doing something harmless, then, well, there's no reason to, you know, try and shit on them for that. And ultimately, I don't think that their positions are as different as you would intuitively think they are. I think that they're framing similar arguments in a different manner, right? At least towards the end. Because I feel like I was able to get... I feel like because of how I have discussions, I feel like even if it's not intentional, you know, I think I lead people to certain conclusions with my thought process. Because my thought process is pretty easy to follow along with, right? Even if you disagree with me. Debate about trans girl cock real, honestly. But yeah, no, but ultimately, it's like, you know, the argument, I think an argument that both of them agree with is, yeah, just be respectful to people, regardless of whether or not you understand it, right? It's like, just don't, you know, just don't bully people for unjustifiable reasons, right? I think that they can both get behind that, you know. At the end of the day, I don't think that bridge between them needs to be burnt. There's a chance that one or both of them are watching this. I don't know if they are. But I would say that, you know, based on the reasons that DemonMama gave me for not liking Hunter Avallone, I think all of those reasons have been resolved. At least for the most part, right? The xenogender thing, it's been resolved. I got him to, you know, to a position where, you know, he acknowledges, yeah, I should be respectful, right? I'll be respectful. I don't understand it, but I'll be respectful. And that's all I needed. So are you debating that or running away? I'm not debating about trans girl cock, okay? I'm sorry. Maybe another time. I just can't be asked. Where was I? Obviously, another reason was, I think because DemonMama and Keffels are, or at least were, friends. Well, Keffels and Hunter Avallone are chill now. So, there's that. That thing was resolved. So it's like, why would they hate each other? Personal shit maybe, but I don't know. I think that there is a bridge that can be rebuilt. Now, I'm not, I'm not gonna say, you have to rebuild that bridge, and fuck you if you don't. Alright, I'm not, like, I understand, like, okay, that's just a parasocial, like, type of, like, oh, I want my favorite content creators to love each other and stuff. Like, nah. I'm not about that. But I think it would be nice. That's all I'm saying. I'm just saying it would be nice if they rebuilt that bridge. Because frankly, I don't think it needed to be burned in the first place. Why are you talking low? Because it's towards the end of the stream. It's what I do when I'm, calmly just ending the stream, doing a little bit of real talk, I think, yeah. I think so long as people are happy, believe what the fuck you want, and respect other people's beliefs and opinions, yeah, exactly. No one's opposed to the cuteness? Aw, why thank you, I appreciate that. Debate your cuteness levels? Debate why your cuteness levels are through the roof. I don't know if I even agree with that. I don't know how to turn me up, the chat can't hear. Oh my god. Stop. I'm ending stream soon anyway. I'm sorry. But, yeah. Eek, you're smiling. Maybe. Maybe a little bit. Mic double. Okay. Alright. Sure. I don't think that there's a debate you could have about Gawk other than, it's okay to be a Gawk goblin sometimes, It's, Gawk hits different. I'm just saying. Okay, I will say, unironically though, all jokes aside, trans people are way better at sex. I'm just saying. That's all I'm gonna say. Also, I didn't do an outfit reveal. I forgot about that. Or, yeah, not reveal, but you get what I mean, right? So, yeah. Ooh. Here's the fit. I think, you got the striped thigh highs. I think it's pretty based. Not gonna lie. Femyoz is just hating on mic. Maybe I am. What's wrong with hating on my mic? I'm just kidding. I love my mic. My mic is such a good little microphone. Yeah, that's right. Such a good little microphone. All right, that was the. All right. More plaid, please. Woo socks. Hell yeah. I also am launching my OnlyFans really, really soon. Like in a few days. Type of soon. So stay tuned for that. I'm just saying. Yeah. Trans people are better at sex. People, when they realize they never had sex. Wait, what? Huh? What does that mean? Now I'm confused. See, that's the thing, though, is, like, I don't even view myself as very good at sex, right? Like, I don't know. Like, I'm not saying I'm terrible at it, but, like, how do you even do sex? Is there, like, a step-by-step tutorial? Well, you're the bottom. Shut up. Okay. But it's like, yeah. Sex isn't real, true. You get railed to your heart's content, that's maybe true. But that, like, I'm not doing anything if that happens. I'm just saying. It's like, I don't think any of my experiences have made me much better at sex, right? It's like, oh, okay. I just let the other person do their thing, I guess, right? And it's like, oh, okay, that works. You just do whatever you want, I guess. Lol, XD. It's like, yep, that works. It's like, I don't know what else I would... You are probably very loud. Okay. Look. Depends on what you mean by loud. How loud are we Unmute me, we can't hear. That bullshit. Pillow princess. Maybe a little bit. Look, I can't help it. I can't help it. Yeah, because you're... Shut up. Swear to God. Swear to God. Y'all are like... You just let them do anything? Yes, so what? Why? Would you be scared of letting them do the same to you? Wow, that's very non-masculine or in non-Giga chat of you, okay? I bet you have a big cock. Yeah, I bet I do as well. I don't know, that's my best educated guess. Or maybe I don't, you never know. Maybe it's medium-sized. I don't know. Toki says no, why? I'm Chad. No, I'm Chad. What if I call you Femi? It's cute. Yeah, you can do that. Call me whatever you want. Just like you. Aw, why thank you. I always appreciate that. Anyways, I'm gonna be ending stream. I know I said that a million times, but I'm actually ending it this time. We know it's small breast. Shut up. No, it's not. It's like medium-sized. Why are you saying it's small? You guys... Fellas, is it gay to like men? Nah. It's not gay if it's with the homies and the socks are on, okay? Teehee, true. Alright, no, for real this time. For real. Like, actually, alright? It's not gay if there's snuggles before or after. Also true. Also true. But, yeah. Yeah, but what if the socks are thigh highs? Then it's gay? Nope, thigh highs count as socks. I don't know what you mean. Anyways, hope you all enjoyed. If you did, make sure to smash like. If you didn't, make sure to smash like anyways. Alright? Yeah. Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed your stay here. And I will see you all in the next one. Goodbye, everyone. Yeah.